Some of this heavy at times blustery around the coasts, followed by sunshine and showers, and it remains unsettled through the rest of the week. Further rain at times, but in any sunshine, temperatures lifting.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You could win our biggest prize giveaway so far. First, there's an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. Plus, courtesy of Variety Cruises, a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, your next holiday could be on us. Choose any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. We'll also send you packing with these luxury travel gifts. For a chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Arlene Foster on GB News, Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon to you and a very happy Easter. Monday, it's 3 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster, all across the UK. Today, there's reaction to the shocking new poll that says the Conservatives could win just 80 seats at the next general election as traditional voters turn to reform. And Rishi Sunak promised to stop the boats, but the number of small boat migrants crossing the channel illegally is increased by an astonishing 43% on the same period last year. Will they ever stop the boats? And next, the protesters have come out in force against Scotland's controversial new hate crime bill. They say it's the death of free speech. Do you agree? And as water companies keep pumping raw sewage into rivers and seas, our bills have gone up by a staggering 6% today. Doesn't seem very fair, does it? But anyway, that's all coming up in your next hour. Well, welcome to the show. Hope you're having a great Easter. I had so much lamb yesterday. The first thing I said today when I woke up was, bleh. On a serious note, hope you're having a great time. It's all about the polls today. What do you make of the fact that the Reform Party might not win any seats, but they're certainly, by the looks of it, going to stop the Conservative Party getting a lot of seats? A war of words has broken out between the two parties. What do you think? How are you going to vote? Is it splitting the vote, or is it just too late for all of that business? Get in touch. GBViews at gbnews.com. And at the top of the show, I want to say a special thank you on behalf of the Batley Grammar School teacher who's passed the message on to you. Over the weekend, yesterday was the 3rd anniversary of the fundraiser for him, and we breached the £100,000 mark. That money going directly into the pocket of a teacher still too afraid and unable to work. Thank you so much for helping to bring a bit of Easter cheer at this time of year. Get in touch usual ways, gbviews at gbnews.com. But first, let's kick off. It's your news headlines with Sam Francis.
Martin, thanks very much, and good afternoon from the GB newsroom. It's just gone 3 o'clock, and we start with news from Scotland this afternoon, where campaigners are now gathered outside Scottish Parliament in protest of new hate crime laws, which they say are a threat to free speech. The laws bring together existing legislation, making it a crime to stir up hatred against people with protected characteristics. That includes disability, age, sexual orientation, or people who are transgender. But some police forces are concerned that dealing with complaints could become a distraction for officers. And the Scottish Conservatives say resources should be directed towards frontline policing. Plans to fine rough sleepers are provoking outrage, with more than 40 Conservative MPs said to be preparing to rebel. The new criminal justice bill would allow police to fine or to move on so-called nuisance rough sleepers. It was intended to replace the Vagrancy Act from 1824, which currently criminalises both rough sleeping and begging. But reports suggest the new bill has been paused while ministers negotiate with MPs who are concerned about the consequences of issuing fines to homeless people. Well, those plans were introduced originally by the former Home Secretary Suella Braverman, who had branded rough sleeping as, she said, a lifestyle choice. The head of the Nurses' Union has today accused the government of packing hospital corridors with patients and has said that the quality of care in hospitals is not only undignified, but fatally unsafe. It comes as new estimates suggest more than 250 patients a week in England may have died needlessly last year because of long waits for a hospital bed. A report released today by the Royal College of Emergency Medicine revealed more than 1.5 million patients waited in A&E departments for longer than 12 hours last year. The Department for Health, though, says it has added thousands of hospital beds and insists it is making progress on waiting times. In other news, the government's compensation scheme for victims of the Windrush scandal has been branded a failure 5 years after it was started. The scheme was originally set up to compensate British citizens who were wrongly threatened with deportation, despite having the right to live in the UK. However, campaigners are warning that the number of people dying before getting payouts is increasing. They're now calling on ministers to overhaul the process and speed up payments, with the Home Office replaced by an independent body. More than 5,400 migrants have been intercepted illegally crossing the English Channel in small boats during the first 3 months of this year. It's a record figure for that quarter, up 43% compared to the same time in 2023. Official figures from the Home Office show that 442 people made that journey in 9 small boats just yesterday. That's despite difficult weather conditions, with lifeboats scrambling to assist some of those arriving. Today's strong winds, though, have now made that journey completely impassable. Some households will feel the effects of a cash boost from today as new economic policies come into effect. The national living wage is increasing to £11.44, giving a pay rise to around 3 million of Britain's lowest paid workers. Small businesses will also benefit from a raised VAT threshold and fully funded apprenticeships. Well, Business Minister Kevin Hollinrake told GB News this morning that the economy is getting better.
We understand it's been difficult, but things are improving. We see the economy turning a corner this year. We'll see interest rates dropping, taxes dropping, of course. £900 a year for the average person in terms of tax reductions with the national insurance cuts. So all those things are all good news to people. Of course, there's more to do, but things really are turning a corner.
Energy bills are due to fall to their lowest rate in 2 years. That's after the regulator Ofgem cut its price cap by 12.3%. It means the average household bill for gas and electricity will fall by around £238 over the course of a year. That's around £20 a month. However, around 10 million households are still being urged to submit their meter readings to avoid overpayment. And a pink dress once worn by Marilyn Monroe has sold for a record-setting price. The long-sleeved silk jersey frock was owned and worn by the world's most famous film star, and it sold for just under £300,000 by an auction house, Julian's, in Los Angeles. Well, there was also a smoking jacket and slippers worn by Playboy founder Hugh Hefner, which went under the hammer for more than £10,000. And for the person who truly has everything, there was a chance to pick up a crypt near both of those iconic stars. The price, well, it was just under £155,000. That's the latest from the GB Newsroom. Tatiana Sanchez will have your next update at 3:30. In the meantime, you can sign up to GB News Alerts. Just scan the code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sam. Now, we've got so much to get stuck into today. Let's get cracking. And we start with the poll that says the Tories could be almost wiped out thanks to Reform UK at the next general election. And it claims that splitting the votes between Rishi Sunak and Richard Tice's parties could leave the Conservatives with just 80 seats. And this would be the Tories' worst ever general election result. Well, I'm joined now by the political journalist John Oxley. John, welcome to the show and a very happy Easter Monday to you. The stuff of nightmares for Rishi Sunak, and I guess back in 2019, John, everybody from the Conservative side said you can't split the vote, you can't let Labour in. Does that wash anymore? Because the two parties don't seem in the mood for any kind of pact. In fact, they seem at each other's throats.
Yeah, and that's a huge problem for the Conservatives, and particularly they have to bear in mind that they're losing votes on all sides. So it's not as though a reconciliation with Reform is necessarily the magic answer. They're losing a lot of votes to Labour. They're losing a lot of votes in those sort of blue wall seats to the Lib Dems, and Reform are hitting them elsewhere. So it's quite hard for Rishi Sunak and the Conservatives to necessarily do a deal with Reform to stop the loss on the right without losing themselves more votes in other seats that matter just as much. It's a really difficult position for Sunak to be in.
Now, John, one thing I've noticed that's very, very different this time around to 2019 is the mood amongst hardcore traditional Conservative voters. Back then, they were saying to the Brexit Party, you have to stand aside, you have to get out of the way, you cannot do this. But now the mood seems to be very, very different. There's a lot of dyed-in-the-wool Tories saying the Tory Party almost deserves to get a kicking. What are you hearing in your land of Spectator?
Exactly that there's this concern among a lot of Conservatives that, the party has had 14 years in power, and what has it really done? The party seems to be complaining about a lot of things, but not really taking responsibility, whether it's people who are concerned about crime and sentencing, or whether it's people who are concerned about immigration. These are mostly things that have happened under the Conservatives for the last 14 years. So they're running out of patience with a party that has been in charge and has seen a lot of things that very traditional, hardcore Conservatives disagree with happening.
And John, the big picture, of course, is going to be who's left and who will be left in the Conservative Party after a wipeout of this nature, if that's how it transpires to pass, because the Mail today saying 13 Conservative ministers could lose their seats. Rishi Sunak even, Penny Mordaunt, Jeremy Hunt, Suella Braverman, some of the big beasts of the Conservative Party could be wiped out. So what's going to be left?
And I mean, that is the big question in politics, depending on how bad the result is and what that means for the Conservatives after the election. But, you're looking at a lot of traditional Conservative heartlands under threat, and those tend to be the sort of MPs that become ministers. They have big majorities, they feel secure, and there's a real question over who will be left. And the reality is, when you look at the electoral map, it's maybe a smattering of some of the MPs in Kent, it's some of the MPs in those real traditional Tory shires that are going to be the only people left. Places like East Anglia, where there's some seats with huge majorities, but often, a lot of big names are going to lose their place if you're looking at seats with 20 or even 25,000 majorities flipping. That is where the Conservative Party puts its talent a lot of the time.
And John, in as far as the chances of any kind of pact, now it's looking increasingly remote by the day. Over the weekend, the Mail launched an attack on the Reform Party, some of the candidates that had got through the vetting process, picking discrepancies and kind of faults with them. This has echoes, of course, of 2019. The Mail printed the email addresses of every Brexit Party candidate who was standing. An extraordinary onslaught. Do you see this now getting uglier and uglier?
I think that's definitely the case. I think when you look at Reform, they see their opportunity. They smell blood in the water and they want to take the fight to the Conservative Party. And that's the rhetoric we're hearing from Richard Tice and a lot of the Conservatives, particularly after they picked up a lot of Reform, particularly after Lee Anderson defected. And I think also the Conservatives are going to be very wary of losing those votes, and they're going to want to kick Reform. Political parties are tribal things. And so when you have a new rival emerging, you're not thinking, how do we do a pact and how do we buy them out? You're thinking, how do we kick them and how do we defeat them? And I think really we're going to be seeing that on both sides of the divide between Reform and the Conservative Party.
And John, the Labour Party would normally be rubbing their hands on the sidelines, watching Reform and the Tories take clumps of fur out of each other. But of course, John, the omnipresent story of Angela Rayner just won't seem to go away. Sir Keir Starmer was on GB News last week, seemingly brushing this aside. Do you think their tactic is just to kind of try and ignore this until it goes away and then they're in power and the story will get buried? Or will it haunt them?
I think that's definitely what Labour and what Sir Keir Starmer is hoping for. But really, this is an unresolved question. And I think it's a bruise that a lot of people in the media and in Conservative politics are going to want to punch at for the coming weeks. And it's not properly resolved. And we're not clear what's been going on there and what Angela Rayner has said to different authorities at different points. So it really... we talk about Labour Party being in this position where they don't want anything to go wrong, and this is a big thing that could go wrong for them.
OK, John Oxley, superb start to the show. You have yourself a cracking rest of your Easter Monday. Thanks, mate. We'll see you again soon.
You too. Thank you.
Now, I'll have lots more on that poll throughout the show, of course, and there's plenty of coverage on our website, gbnews.com, and you've helped to make it the fastest growing national news website in the country, so thank you very much. Now, the number of small boat migrants crossing the English Channel illegally this year has increased by a whopping 43% on the same period last year. A total of 5,435 migrants have arrived since the beginning of the year, well in excess of the 3,793 who crossed the Channel by small boats at this point in 2023. And over the Easter weekend, 791 Channel migrants reached UK waters. Well, I'm joined now by our Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark White, welcome to the show. An Easter gift that Rishi Sunak will really be ill-afforded to accept. This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again, isn't it?
Yeah, it was a bumper Easter weekend as far as those trying to manage the English Channel in the form of border force and indeed the lifeboats from the RNLI who were called out multiple times during the course of yesterday in particular, as the criminal gangs were pushing these small boats out into the English Channel in far from ideal conditions. There were 50-knot winds blowing, churning up the waves mid-channel. It was very treacherous out there, but still these boats were pushed out, and 9 made it with those 442 people on board, almost 800 over the course of 2 days. And that took the figure in terms of those who've come across the English Channel this year to, as you mentioned there, more than 5,400. Now, when you do the figures, and extrapolate where we are on last year, it's 43% higher than last year. And that's important, really, because last year the Prime Minister and other ministers, including the Home Secretary, was able to stand up at various points during the year and say, look, we're managing to stop the boats, not completely, but it's a process. And as the year got on, the figure got higher until it ended the year at 36% down. And they looked upon that as really quite a significant victory in terms of stopping the boats. It went, they said, against the trend in the European Union elsewhere, where very significant numbers were coming into Europe from North Africa and through other routes, yet the number coming across the channel was down. They can't do that now because we're only 3 months into this new year, and already it's been completely reversed and then some, to be 43% higher compared to 36% down. And of course the government might well, Martin, turn around and say, judge us on where we are at the end of the year. But having said that, they didn't do that. They were up at news conference after news conference throughout last year telling us how well they'd done. So they've got to take the medicine as well when the situation is reversed and realise that they can no longer say that they are reducing the small boats, certainly so far this year.
And Mark, the government were very proud of the fact they were stemming the tide from Albania. They had a pact with Albania, and also the weather was a great asset. But do we have any inclination of the national makeup of the new arrivals, the most recent arrivals, and indeed the circumstances? Are they refugees fleeing war zones, or do we think they may be something else?
Well, I mean, in terms of the Albanians, again, they only tell a partial picture because, yes, indeed, the number of Albanians being represented on the small boats is just tiny now, 1 or 2%, if that. There are very few Albanians coming on the small boats. And that's because they never wanted to be put into the asylum system in the first place. The vast majority of the Albanians coming through wanted to go and work in the construction trade or go off and work for criminal gangs in sort of cannabis factories or wherever else for 6 months or a year and then head back to Albania. So they've found other routes into the country, and we've been told by very reliable sources that most Albanians now are coming in the backs of lorries and are picked up in Eastern Europe and driven all the way through to the northern coast of France and then come across on the ferry or go through the Channel Tunnel. But the other nations represented, you mentioned there, well, Iran and Syria and also Afghanistan are well represented. They have been for a number of years, and that continues to be the case. But we see a shift in demographics on the boats from other regions. So Vietnamese nationals coming across now have risen quite significantly. And again, that was evident in video that was filmed by one of the migrants coming across the channel yesterday, showing quite a number of Vietnamese on the boat that person was filming on. Also Chinese nationals coming across, Indian nationals who come across as well. And the thing that all of those people have in common is they are not fleeing war zones. And then, you know, those who are very critical of what they say is the asylum system being abused will point to this and say that this is purely economic migration at work here.
Mark White, a comprehensive and excellent summary as ever. Thank you very much for joining us on the show. Now, it's our biggest giveaway of the year so far. Your chance to win a 10 grand Greek cruise for two, 10 grand in cash and a whole host of luxury travel gifts on top. Your 2025 holiday could be on us. And here's all the details you need to enter this superb competition.
You could win our biggest prize giveaway so far. First, there's an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. Plus, courtesy of Variety Cruises, a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, your next holiday could be on us. Choose any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. We'll also send you packing with these luxury travel gifts. For a chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
What's a Greek gift that could be? Now, Scotland's controversial hate crime bill has become law today, on April the 1st. Is this the end of free speech north of the border? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Tom Harwood. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
Shocking new study says that vaping might be linked to cancer. Not that shocking.
It found e-cigarettes can cause similar DNA changes to cells as smoking, leading experts to claim that vaping does not seem as harmless as originally billed.
So joining us now is Robert Sidebottom from the UK Vaping Industry Association. Good morning, Robert. Is this terrible news for your industry? I imagine you're going to try and defend the product still and say that there's still a lot more research to be done.
Well, I don't need to really defend the product, because I think actually if you read the article and you read the detail in the article, I mean, it actually starts and it states with, while this doesn't mean that vaping has the same degree of cancer risks as smoking does, it implies that vaping may have negative health impacts. However, we've never said that vaping is completely risk-free. And we've always said that it is 95% safer than smoking, which it is. We accept that further research needs to be done. And actually, we welcome studies into the health impact of vaping, as we want to give every former smoker the full confidence that vaping is considerably safer than smoking. And that's the important message.
But that's about the former smokers. What about the young people who are taking up vaping, Robert? It's better not to vape. It's better not to vape at all, and we know why they take up smoking, because you lure them into your shops with silly flavours called bubblegum.
Well, we can get into the flavour debate. That's no problem at all, because, you know, adults like flavours. Particularly I love squashy sweets. These products, and let's be absolutely clear, are not for children. They are an age-gated product that are for adults only. And that is exactly who they should be sold to.
I'm so sorry, Rob, we've run out of time, but hopefully this research will show that they certainly are not for children.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
I'm Camilla Tominey. This is GB News, Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:25. I'm Martin Daubney and this is GB News. Now, later in the show, we'll talk about the London Council that's making a whopping £1 million a month from a single low-traffic neighbourhood, printing money, milking the motorist dry. Now, Scotland's controversial new hate crime law has come into effect today, on April the 1st. Campaigners held a protest outside the Scottish Parliament at lunchtime, and they held up a coffin, saying that the new law amounts to the death of free speech. Well, GB News' Scotland reporter Tony Maguire is live in Edinburgh. Tony, welcome to the show. A lot of people saying, Tony, this is the death of free speech, and Scotland has now the most draconian free speech laws on the planet. What's the mood on the ground?
Yeah, certainly. This is a real far-flung step from the usual progressive SNP policies which we've come to know over the last 2 decades. But indeed, the death of free speech is what was being marked today. This new Hate Crime and Public Order Act, which for many people believe is going to limit what they can say, not just down the pub, not just in the workplace, but around the kitchen table. Now, behind me, you can actually see a coffin which was brought, a bit of a prop, let's face it, but you know, it hits the right note because people are actually now talking, you know, the boisterous people, the animated people, and they're actually a little bit scared about saying the wrong thing in the wrong time. Now, they very clearly
tell Rishi Sunak I'm call Rishi. It's been over a month.
All right. So big fan of Rishi Sunak here just now. But indeed, this new Hate Crime Act has brought a lot of people out today. Being a bank holiday, it was about 400 people here today, give or take. And indeed, they all shared their views. There was representatives from the Alba Party, the Family Party, and indeed lots of groups, including various pastors today who shared some very significant messaging about how this new law, this draconian law as they call it, is actually going to impact everything from the church to the gender critical feminist movement and so on and so forth. So not the best day in terms of the weather for a protest, but that did not stop hundreds of people turning out here at Holyrood to have their voices heard.
Great stuff. Thank you very much for joining us there, Tony Maguire. Some of the most draconian free speech laws on the planet. And joining me now to discuss them is Ross Thompson, who's the former Conservative MP for Aberdeen South. Welcome to the show, Ross. So, Ross, looking at those scenes there live in Edinburgh, hundreds of people saying we hate the hate speech laws. Why on earth is Scotland persevering with this? I mean, aren't there greater things to be worrying about? I don't know, the state of the NHS, education, drug addiction. Why so obsessed with free speech laws like this?
I completely agree, Martin. There has never been a greater gulf between the elected representatives and the people. It's deeply troubling that this law is now in force. It's deeply insidious, it's flawed, and it's going to have a chilling effect on free speech. And this is at a time when, as you say, there's other issues to be addressed, particularly real crime. You know, for example, my area here in Aberdeen, it's no longer safe to get on a bus. The city centre is in some ways unwalkable. The police are not visible, and instead of being there on the streets, dealing with real concerns and real crime, they're going to be in offices policing people's thoughts and views that they post online.
And indeed, Ross, there are lots of high-profile opponents of this, such as J.K. Rowling, of course, the Harry Potter author, who is specifically and deliberately today setting out to breach these laws and say they will do so repeatedly. And indeed, comedians who work for GB News, such as Andrew Doyle, Josh Howie, planning an event up there where they're almost trying to get arrested. There's going to be anarchy, Ross, because how are the police going to arrest everybody who specifically sets out to break these laws? They're going to need a big jail.
Absolutely, Martin. What we see is woke totalitarianism now in Scotland. Can you imagine someone like J.K. Rowling, who has contributed so much to the world of literature, to culture, who is an icon, who is a hero in Scotland, and the creator of Harry Potter and Robert Galbraith, coming home to Scotland, the home of the Enlightenment, and being arrested potentially on arrival, and if put for a sheriff court, could experience 12 months in prison, or if we go to the High Court, even 7 years.
OK, I think we lost Ross there. Not a problem. Thanks for joining us. Ross Thompson is the former Conservative MP for Aberdeen South. It's going to be one heck of a story to watch this, because if people like J.K. Rowling are specifically setting out to get arrested by breaking hate speech laws around trans issues, around misgendering issues, Elon Musk, of course, has said he'll do the same. He owns the biggest social media platform in terms of free speech, X, on the planet. What are they going to do? Just arrest everybody, comedians who perform at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival? It just makes you wonder, what is the priority of government anymore? Protecting hurt feelings, protecting minority groups, or just getting the job done? Let me know what you think. GBviews@gbnews.com. There's lots more still to come between now and 4 o'clock, and I'll get reaction to the news that water bills are going to go up by 6% at the same time as companies keep pumping sewage into bathing areas. We're paying for their mistakes, and how are they going to get away with this? Will it wash with you? But first, it's time for your latest news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Martin, thank you. The top stories this hour. Campaigners are gathered outside the Scottish Parliament in protest of new hate crime laws, which they say are a threat to free speech. The laws bring together existing legislation, making it a crime to stir up hatred against people with protected characteristics. That includes disability, age, sexual orientation, or people who are transgender. But some police forces are concerned that dealing with complaints could become a distraction for officers. The Scottish Conservatives say resources should be directed towards frontline policing. Plans to fine rough sleepers are provoking outrage, with more than 40 Tory MPs said to be preparing to rebel. The new criminal justice bill would allow police to fine or move on so-called nuisance rough sleepers. It was intended to replace the Vagrancy Act from 1824, which currently criminalises both rough sleeping and begging. But reports suggest the new bill has been paused while ministers negotiate with MPs who are concerned about the consequences of issuing fines to homeless people. More than 250 patients a week in England may have died needlessly last year because of long waits for a hospital bed. A report by the Royal College of Emergency Medicine revealed more than 1.5 million patients waited in emergency departments for longer than 12 hours last year. The Department for Health says it added thousands of hospital beds and insists it's making progress on waiting times. And energy bills are due to fall to their lowest rate in 2 years after the regulator Ofgem cut its price cap by 12.3%. It means the average household bill for gas and electricity will fall by around £238 over the course of a year, or about £20 a month. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
For stunning gold and silver coins you'll always value, Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2578 and €1.1700. The price of gold is £1,777 and 2 pence per ounce, and the FTSE 100 at 7,952 points.
Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you very much, Tatiana. Now, the gender gap is very, very real, but it's not women who are missing out now. No, if you're a boy, and especially if you're a white working-class boy, you're increasingly likely to struggle at school and at work, the forgotten demographic. We'll discuss that next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Samantha Dean. In Bottisford in Leicestershire, the A52 is closed. It's slow traffic due to accident investigation work between the Red Mile turn-off at Bottisford and Castleview Road at Easthorpe. In the West Midlands, the M6 northbound 2 lanes are closed, queuing traffic due to a spillage of diesel earlier and a vehicle fire. That's from Junction 9 Wood Green Road at Wednesbury to Junction 10 Wolverhampton, congestion to Junction 7 at Great Bar. In Kent, the M25 anti-clockwise, long delays and 1 lane closed due to a broken down vehicle. That's at Junction 1A, the Dartford Tunnel. Congestion to Junction 3, the Swanley interchange. And in Devon, the M5 northbound slow due to an earlier accident from Junction 28 Honiton Road to 27 at Tiverton.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
So many of you have been getting in touch over the WASPy issue. And actually, I just want to bring forward a view from Tony, who has written in to say something that we haven't included in this conversation so far. Tony says, it was well publicised. Stop all the crying. His words. He says the Pensions Act 1995 provided for this change. It was marginally sped up in 2010, but the fundamental issue, the WASPy issue, didn't come about in 2010 or 2011. It came about in 1995.
Yeah, people know that the legislation was earlier, but the problem is a lot of women weren't told.
Beverly, who's a WASPy woman, has written in saying, were the WASPy women living under a stone? I am one of the women who was affected by this change. My peers and I were fully aware of the changes. It was widely discussed on TV, radio and in the newspapers as soon as the decision was made. We weren't happy at the time, but we recognised that it was fair. It's wrong to spend billions in this way. I'd rather the post office people who suffered so much were reimbursed.
Well, I think for the social contract to work and for our society to be cohesive and harmonious, if that's possible, you can't just have people who don't work or don't have much receive all the benefit.
Well, now you're arguing against people. You're saying that people should have, to some extent, have looked in 1995 when the change happened. But fundamentally, it's not just WASPy women who've been screwed over since the financial crisis. We have a 70-year high tax burden. Someone earning £60,000 this year will pay more tax than someone earning £60,000 has ever had to pay before.
But Tom, you do realise this isn't the first time that we've had hugely high tax rates on income.
Breakfast. Spring has sprung, the grass is green. I wonder where King Charles has been. Well, he was
I've got all watery-eyed because I'm so keen in the royal family, and I thought it was such a shame he was so ill.
We see the economy turning a corner this year. We'll see interest rates dropping, taxes dropping, of course. All those things are all good news to people. Of course, there's more to do, but things really are turning a corner.
If Labour is privileged enough to form a government, we will stand by these entitlements. We will not take these entitlements away or reduce them. But what we will do is put forward an actual way of accessing them.
I'm a moorland, I live in a hole. Yeah, what? That's what just came into my head. I was a mole and I live in a hole.
From 6, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back. 3:38 on your Easter Monday is your time. I'm Martin Daubney and this is GB News. Well, wasn't it great to see the King out and about again yesterday? Well, later in the show, I'll be joined by a royal expert to celebrate King Charles on the mend, it seems. Now, there's good news and there's bad news today as some bills fall while others continue to go up. The average household energy bill is dropping to its lowest point in 2 years. However, water bills are rising by 6%. And this is, of course, at a time when water companies keep pumping gallons and gallons of sewage into our waterways. Well, let's cross now to North Devon and speak to our southwest of England reporter, Jeff Moody. Jeff, welcome to the show and a very happy Easter Monday to you. So we're hearing today a 47% boom in sewage spills, yet a 6% boom in our water bills. Jeff, that to me sounds like a lose-lose scenario.
Sounds like an April Fool, really, doesn't it? Sadly, it's not, though. You're absolutely right. It's not good news all round. I mean, so many people have been out this bank holiday weekend, haven't they, trying to enjoy the sunshine that we've had. We've had a few bursts of it in places. But those weather warnings, those sewage warnings, are in place over much of the country. I mean, just here in Devon, there are 29 beaches that this weekend have been deemed unsafe because of the amount of raw sewage that has been discharged into those waters this weekend alone. And the reason for that is the rain. We've had lots of very heavy rain, and the Victorian sewers just really can't cope with that. And in the deluges that we've been having in recent weeks. And because of that, the water companies face a very simple choice. They either let the sewage roam onto the streets, or they throw the water, charge it out to the sea. They choose the latter, But the bad news about that is they're now raising the prices 6% in order to cover the cost of improving the drainage system. Well, we've been out and about this weekend to speak to people and find out what they think, and people aren't very happy.
Just feels like all the bills are going up at the minute, but I just didn't expect the water bill to increase quite so much, as mine's almost doubled monthly what I pay now.
They're in it for profit, and if they need to raise bills to do the job that they're supposed to be doing in the first place, what have they been spending the money on up till now?
I think the levels of sewage are absolutely outrageous, and the lack of investment by water companies is disgraceful. Complete lack of business planning.
We live in Lancashire, we have the River Hodder, and we do a lot of wild swimming. I can't wild swim because of the amount of sewerage in the canals. What's that about?
I think it should be back in government control, public ownership. I think private sector's just sucking the money out of it.
Well, the water companies say that if you're having financial difficulties, you can always get in touch with them and they will help you with your bills. But that's certainly cold comfort for most people right now.
Thank you, Jeff Moody, a font of knowledge as ever. Now, moving on, if you're a boy, then you're more likely to struggle at school or at work. Britain has a serious boy problem, but does anybody care? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather. It's a mixed picture out there, and over the next few days it remains very similar, unsettled, further spells of rain, but there will be some warm sunshine at times. Looking at the pressure pattern, low pressure systems moving in from the Atlantic, bringing spells of rain, some stronger winds, particularly later on in the week. But there will be some sunny spells in between, which is what we've seen across parts of England and Wales today. These showers should slowly fade away. However, we will see further spells of rain across parts of Scotland into northern England, particularly in the east, some of this heavy at times. In between, there will be some clear spells, and this will allow temperatures to dip down into low single figures, so perhaps a touch of light frost in the countryside for one or two of us, but for most it's a cloudy start to Tuesday, further showers in places. This rain across eastern Scotland remains here for much of the day, a little brighter across the far north. Some sunny spells developing across much of the UK as we move through into the afternoon, but a scattering of showers. Towards the southwest, this band of cloud and rain will push in, and temperatures overall reaching the mid-teens in the south, still chilly across Scotland, 7 or 8 degrees. Taking a look at Wednesday, the next area of low pressure moves in, showery outbreaks of rain pushing north and eastwards across the country. Some of this heavy at times, blustery around the coasts, followed by sunshine and showers, and it remains unsettled through the rest of the week. Further rain at times, but in any sunshine, temperatures lifting.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. It's 3:45. I'm Martin Daubney and this is GB News. Now, at 4 o'clock, I'll get more reaction to the poll that says the Tories might just win 80 seats at the next general election, their worst ever performance. Now, the gender gap is very, very real, but it's not women who are this time missing out, because if you're a boy, you're increasingly likely to struggle at school and at work, and even more so if you're white and working class. Well, why is this, and what can be done about it? Well, I'm joined now by the Conservative MP for Don Valley, Nick Fletcher, who's something of a champion for men and boys. Nick, welcome to the show, and I hope you're having a very happy Easter Monday. Nick, we hear a lot about the myth of white male privilege, but the facts paint a very different picture. Boys start behind at age 3, they never catch up. White working class lads are the least likely to go to university of any demographic, 14.6%, the lowest of any group. A third of white boys 18 to 24 are now economically inactive, and that's doubled since the 1990s. 2 million on the scrap heap. Nobody cares about them. Why not?
I don't think it's true that nobody cares. There's people who do care, but I do believe that we're definitely taking our eye off this ball. I think since the 1990s, there's an awful lot of effort gone into pushing girls, getting them forward, getting them into higher education, further education, and I think that's been the right thing to do. But I think while we've been doing that, we've definitely not been looking at what's happening to the young boys, and I think it's people like me as a member of Parliament, it's my duty to shine a light on this and see what we can actually do about it, because we definitely need to do something.
Now, I know, Nick, you've been mocked for the fact, I think a very good idea, of putting forward the notion for a minister for men and boys to get these issues on the table. And if you look at the data, then that will be self-serving. It'll be obvious that that needs to be done. And yet, Nick, whenever you've tried to put that motion forward, you're ridiculed for it. Does that underline this notion, this prevailing mindset that to be born male, to be born white, is to be born as one of life's lottery winners? How do we overcome that mindset when the facts paint a very different picture?
Well, we need to just continue shouting up like I'm doing, like I know yourself done, and there's many other colleagues in the House that have done that too, because that's the only way that we get the people who can actually make the decisions to look at this. And there's, like you said, I mean, the outcomes for men are quite poor at the moment, to say the least. I mean, 13 men a day think the only way out is to actually take their own life. 88 men are dying due to heart disease, 66 men are dying due to alcoholism. All these different figures that are adding up, and these are all outcomes of taking our eye off the ball and not valuing men. And I think we need to value men. I also think we need to value women too. And it's right that we've got a minister for women. It's right that we've got a cabinet minister for women. It's right that we've got a women's health strategy. But we've got all these problems that are there in plain sight for people to see, and yet we have no men's health strategy, we have no minister for men, and we have no minister for men in cabinet level. Now, the health department have worked really hard with me and colleagues over this past 12 months, and we're definitely making progress there. We've got a men's health ambassador that's actually been shortlisted at the moment. We've got money towards prostate cancer screening. We've got the first task and finish group with regards to men's health, which is great. Now we just need the education department to do exactly the same thing. Take on board what good people and good colleagues are saying, and let's see what we can do about this gender attainment gap.
Well, Nick, I salute you on all of that. I'm one of those lads. When I was at school in the 70s, I was the first lad in my community to make it to university. I'm a coal miner's son, as you know. I don't know if I'd make it now. I just wonder if there's too much stacked against people like me. The debt mountain they incur for going to university, and also an academic situation that seems to teach the mantra that white men are toxic, they're a problem, and if you complain about it, you're fragile. There's a crisis in masculinity. Nick, we need to give young people a purpose. If you give a man a purpose, he will have a productive life. It isn't part of the problem. We've taken away those manufacturing jobs. We haven't replaced the pits. We haven't replaced the steel yards. We just need to give young men hope.
Definitely, but I don't think we should give men excuses to fail either. I don't believe in that. So I think we should do everything that we can to encourage our boys to get into all kinds of different industries, just like we've done with girls. I know there was a huge campaign of this girl can when it came to sport, this girl can when it came to them engaging in the STEM subjects, and they've had huge successes with that. But we've not seen the same for boys with regards to their health, with regards to education, with regards to administration jobs. Why aren't we putting those sort of campaigns forward that this boy can too? I'm a father of a boy and a girl. I want them both to do equally as well. I think society owes them that. The opportunities should be there for all. They should be encouraged to take those opportunities, and we shouldn't give them excuses to fail. I don't believe in excuses. I believe in working hard, trying hard, and breaking down any barriers that are in front of us. That's what you've got to do. That's what I've done as a businessman over the years. Whenever there's been a problem, I've done everything I can to break down the barriers that have stopped me moving forward. And I think that's what we need to do for our young boys and our young girls too.
Nick Fletcher, you're bringing a warm glow to my heart. Thank you for the work you do. Much appreciated to have you on the show, and please keep going. We need people like you speaking common sense. Thanks, mate. Now, it's the Easter bank holiday and people have been visiting local markets to celebrate the arrival of spring. Well, it doesn't really feel like spring, does it? Well, just before the long weekend, East Yorkshire held its first ever Young Traders Market to encourage people under 30 to get started in markets and trade in their local towns. Our reporter Anna Riley was at the event and has this story for us.
Best bananas, pick it out.
Markets are the heartbeat of many British towns.
All your fresh veg. 2 puddings for £3, strawberry, seedless, grapes and apple.
But they must attract young people if they are to survive. That's why the National Market Traders Federation are supporting the next generation of market stall holders through their Young Trader of the Year competition.
The average age of market traders is about 55, which as an industry we need more young people. They're coming in. This is the 12th year we're doing this campaign. It is working, but we've got to keep doing this. We've got to keep fresh blood coming in. Young traders bring young shoppers, and it's just great for the industry all around. For little investment can be their own boss, have something they're proud of, and they can expand. I mean, there's loads of businesses out there that started off as market trading, even the likes of Tesco's. So it's little steps. We start at the bottom, work your way up, and you could be the next Alan Sugar.
The first Young Traders Market has been held in East Yorkshire to boost business for entrepreneurs aged between 16 and 30. These stall holders in Beverley appreciate the platform that the event has given them.
Can markets seem a little bit old-fashioned? Yes, but now we've got younger people coming down, we can really develop them and make the high street that little bit more interesting for the youth.
It's a lot better if you have to grind out the hours, work in markets like these, in the rain, in the wind, in the snow, and I think it gives you more of a love for it.
I think that's what's really good about young traders and doing markets. It's very supportive. It's not, I mean, it is a competition, but people don't really feel like that. I think it's nice to boost each other.
Most marketplaces are run by councils who have been their public custodians since Victorian times.
But obviously important, particularly for rural areas, to create employment opportunities, and obviously self-employment and starting your own business is a great way to do that. So any way that we can help as a council through our economic development and business support services to encourage younger people to do that and to start their business here in the East Riding is obviously something we'd encourage.
And without the customers, traders, young or old, just wouldn't exist.
Buy my fruit, I like to buy my plants from independent people. I want to see it alive. I want to see people come to Beverley. And OK, online has its place, but if we keep doing online, we shan't have any independent traders. We shan't have this, and that'll be such a sad thing.
The winner of the National Young Traders Market competition will be announced in August. Anna Riley, GB News.
Great stuff. On Your Bike spirit alive and kicking there in Yorkshire. Now, I've got a bunch of emails quickly to go through. Stuart says this: the Conservative Party only have themselves to blame for a potential wipeout at the next election. They stabbed their elected leader Boris in the back in an effort to save their own skins, and it has massively blown up in their faces. And what have they actually done in 14 years of power? Well, that's exactly what we're going to be talking about next, because a poll says the Conservatives could win just 80 seats at the next election, thanks to so many voters dumping the Tories and backing reform. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. But first, time for your weather with Greg Dewhurst.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather. It's a mixed picture out there, and over the next few days it remains very similar, unsettled, further spells of rain, but there will be some warm sunshine at times. Looking at the pressure pattern, low pressure systems moving in from the Atlantic, bringing spells of rain, some stronger winds, particularly later on in the week. But there will be some sunny spells in between, which is what we've seen across parts of England and Wales today. These showers should slowly fade away. However, we will see further spells of rain across parts of Scotland into northern England, particularly in the east, some of this heavy at times. In between, there will be some clear spells, and this will allow temperatures to dip down into low single figures. So perhaps a touch of light frost in the countryside for one or two of us, but for most, it's a cloudy start to Tuesday. Further showers in places. This rain across eastern Scotland remains here for much of the day. A little brighter across the far north. Some sunny spells developing across much of the UK as we move through into the afternoon, but a scattering of showers. Towards the southwest, this band of cloud and rain will push in, and temperatures overall reaching the mid-teens in the south, still chilly across Scotland, 7 or 8 degrees. Taking a look at Wednesday, the next area of low pressure moves in, showery outbreaks of rain pushing north and eastwards across the country. Some of this heavy at times, blustery around the coasts, followed by sunshine and showers, and it remains unsettled through the rest of the week. Further rain at times, but in any sunshine, temperatures lifting.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Samantha Dean. In Bottisford in Leicestershire, the A52 is closed. Slow traffic due to accident investigation work between the Red Mile turn-off and Castleview Road. In the West Midlands, the M6 northbound, long delays and 2 lanes closed due to a spillage of diesel and an earlier vehicle fire between 9 at Wednesbury and Junction 10 at Wolverhampton. Congestion to Junction 7 at Great Bar. In Northampton, the A45 westbound's closed, queuing traffic due to an accident from Queen Eleanor roundabout to the M1 at Junction 15 at Northampton. In Essex, the M11 southbound's queuing due to an earlier accident between Junction 9 Saffron Walden and 8 Bishop Stortford. And in Kent, the M25 anti-clockwise, 1 lane closed, queuing traffic due to recovery work at Bobdon Way, Junction 1A.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
With thanks to Variety Cruises, a family company sailing since 1942, you have the chance to win a £10,000 7-night small boat cruise for 2. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, you'll be able to choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and explore Greece like never before. Plus, you'll also win £10,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer sizzle. And we'll pack you off with these luxury travel gifts. For a chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon to you and a very happy Easter Monday. It's 4 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster all across the UK. On today's show, there's reaction to the shocking new poll that says the Conservatives could win just 80 seats at the general election, their worst ever performance as traditional Tory voters turn to the Reform Party. And Angela Rayner is under mounting pressure over whether she broke the law when she sold that council house. And now the former head of the Standards Watchdog has said Labour's deputy leader should face a full police inquiry. And Rishi Sunak promised to stop the boats, one of his 5 core pledges. But the number of small boat migrants crossing the Channel illegally has increased by a staggering 43% on the same period last year. And protesters have come out in force against Scotland's controversial new hate crime bill. They say it's the death of free speech, and it was introduced on April the 1st. You couldn't make it up. That's all coming up in your next hour. Welcome to the show. Hope you're having a restful and peaceful Easter. Keep your feet up because it all starts again tomorrow. Now, politics never sleeps, though. What do you make of the Conservative Party and the Reform Party taking clumps out of each other over the weekend? It looks like a pact is off the table, so they seem to be at each other's throats. Hundreds of you have been in touch so far about how you intend to vote next time round, because, of course, there could be an historic wipeout of the Tories, reduced to just 80 seats. Would you still vote Conservative, or is the party over? Let me know. Email the usual way, gbviews@gbnews.com. But before we kick off into our next hour, time for your news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Martin, thank you and good afternoon. The top stories this hour. Campaigners in Edinburgh have delivered a coffin outside the Scottish Parliament, symbolising what they say is death of free speech. It's after the introduction of a new hate crime law, which makes it a crime to stir up hatred against people with protected characteristics. That includes disability, age, sexual orientation, or people who are transgender. Gender-critical author J.K. Rowling said it risks outlawing genuine debates over biological sex, while some police forces have raised concerns that complaints could be lodged for political reasons. The Scottish Conservatives say resources should be directed towards frontline policing. Plans to fine rough sleepers are provoking outrage, with more than 40 Conservative MPs said to be preparing to rebel. The new criminal justice bill would allow police to fine or move on so-called nuisance rough sleepers. It was intended to replace the Vagrancy Act from 1824, which currently criminalises both rough sleeping and begging. But reports suggest the new bill has been paused while ministers negotiate with MPs who are concerned about the consequences of issuing fines to homeless people. The plans were introduced by the former Home Secretary Suella Braverman, who branded rough sleeping a lifestyle choice. The head of the Nurses' Union has accused the government of packing hospital corridors with patients and says the quality of care is not only undignified but fatally unsafe. It comes as new estimates suggest more than 250 patients a week in England may have died needlessly last year because of long waits for a hospital bed. A report by the Royal College of Emergency Medicine revealed more than 1.5 million patients waited in emergency departments for longer than 12 hours last year. The Department for Health says it added thousands of hospital beds and insists it's making progress on waiting times. The government's compensation scheme for victims of the Windrush scandal has been branded a failure 5 years after it started. It was set up to compensate British citizens who were wrongly threatened with deportation despite having the right to live in the UK. However, campaigners are warning the number of people dying before getting payouts is increasing. They're calling on ministers to overhaul the process and speed up payments, with the Home Office replaced by an independent body. More than 5,400 migrants have been intercepted crossing the English Channel in small boats during the first 3 months of this year. It's a record figure for that quarter up 43% compared to the same time in 2023. Official figures from the Home Office show 442 people made the crossing in 9 small boats yesterday. That's despite difficult weather conditions, with lifeboats scrambling to assist some of the arrivals. Today's strong winds have now made the journey completely impassable. Now, some households will feel the effects of a cash boost from today as new economic policies come into effect. The national living wage is increasing to £11.44, giving a pay rise to around 3 million of Britain's lowest paid workers. Small businesses will also benefit from a raised VAT threshold and fully funded apprenticeships for young people. Business Minister Kevin Hollinrake told GB News the economy is getting better.
We understand it's been difficult, but things are improving. We'll see the economy turning a corner this year. We'll see interest rates dropping, taxes dropping, of course. £900 a year for the average person in terms of tax reductions with the national insurance cuts. So all those things are all good news for people. Of course, there's more to do, but things really are turning a corner.
Well, that as energy bills are due to fall to their lowest rate in 2 years after the regulator Ofgem cut its price cap by 12.3%. It means the average household bill for gas and electricity will fall by around £238 over the course of a year, or about £20 a month. However, around 10 million households are still being urged to submit their meter readings to avoid overpayment. And the people of County Meath in Ireland are raising a glass to a 1,000-year-old oak tree that's about to get a second life. The huge tree, which measured a girth of 10 metres, stood for centuries on the grounds of Swainstone Farm, but its 1,000-year lifespan came to an end when Storm Ellen hit last year. Now, thanks to the revival of the Preston's whisky label, which has been off shelves for 60 years, the old tree will be transformed into whisky barrels. Experts say it's rare for Irish oak to be used to make barrels, and rarer still for whisky lovers to get a taste of ancient Ireland. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now back to Martin.
Thank you, Tatiana. Wow, Irish whiskey in barrels made from a 1,000-year-old oak tree. Where do I sign up? Now we start with the poll that says the Tories could be almost wiped out thanks to Reform UK at the next general election. And it claims that splitting the votes between Rishi Sunak and Richard Tice's parties could leave the Conservative with just 80 seats. And that will be the Tories' worst ever result in the party's history. Well, I'm joined now by Jim Pickard, who's the Deputy Political Editor of the Financial Times. Jim, welcome to the show. I hope you're having a peaceful Easter. This is grim reading for Rishi Sunak, and there seems to be no sign of any pact in sight. In fact, Rishi Sunak and Richard Tice's party, Jim, seem to be taking lumps out of each other over the weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a whole slew of allegations in the Mail on Sunday about Reform candidates and some of the more curious, slightly unsavoury things that some of them had done. And there's clearly a bit of a war of words as well, with Richard Tice suggesting that the new vice chair of the Conservative Party, Jonathan Gullis, that Richard Tice, might know some unsavoury things about him. So not very fraternal exchanges going on over the weekend. And of course, the Conservative Party is very worried about the fact that Reform has risen and risen in the polls. It started out a year or two ago at a negligible figure. And I think as people have become more familiar with it, they've realised that it is Nigel Farage's party. It has gone up in the polls. It's still not a huge showing, but at about 15 points, when the Conservative Party is in the low 20s, it's very much snapping at the heels of Rishi Sunak's party and is, of course, providing pressure on Sunak to move further to the right. But that gives him a bit of a dilemma because, as we've discussed before, the Conservative Party's electoral coalition in 2019 consisted of, relatively centrist voters in southern England and culturally more right-wing Brexit favouring voters in the north, which was a coalition that Boris Johnson managed to hold together, but Rishi Sunak is struggling to do so.
You know, Jim, I'm sensing a real difference of mood, though, between this election and in 2019. In 2019, you will well recall you covered that election. There's this feeling of don't split the vote, don't let Corbyn in, ABC, anyone but Corbyn. Whereas now, even though with this projection, Jim, the Reform Party might be looking to win any seats whatsoever, this idea of just eviscerating the Conservatives, of taking their margin right down, now seems to be one of the missions to cause as much damage as possible to the Tories. And this feeling of you let Keir Starmer in, even amongst Conservative voters, it doesn't seem to wash anymore, Jim.
Yeah, so I think the question will be for voters when we come to a general election, and I think voters in Britain know that it's a first past the post system. They know that basically if you're a junior party like Reform or previously Brexit Party UK, or if you're the Lib Dems, you have a very low chance of success. And therefore we usually see at a general election the voting public coalesce around the two relatively left and relatively right alternatives. So, yeah, Rishi Sunak's strategists will be hoping that some of this reform showing in the polls is basically it's disgruntlement with the Conservatives. When it finally comes to voting in a general election, a lot of that 15% wedge of votes, currently people saying that they'll back reform, could split in favour of the Conservatives when it finally comes to the crunch. We know in 2019 that in the end, the Brexit Party only stood in a minority of seats. At the moment, the Reform Party is saying it will stand in all seats. But I was quite interested when I went up to Grimsby only a month ago and I asked to speak to the Reform candidate and they told me that there wasn't one, which makes me wonder whether they are as fully prepared for this general election as they're making out. I don't get the impression they have an awful lot of funding either, especially when compared to the two main parties. But no doubt about it at all, it's a headache for Rishi Sunak and it's making his Conservative MPs pretty nervous, because if they go down from 350 MPs to as little as 100 or 150 or what the recent polls are suggesting, it would be the worst wipeout for the party for a very long time.
Now, Jim, ordinarily the Labour Party will be rubbing their hands and enjoying the car crash of the Reform Party and the Tories kicking off with each other. But at the moment, of course, their own bad news stories simply won't go away. And, of course, that is Angela Rayner and this now impending potential police investigation over that council house. Jim, do you think this story will be sufficient to put a dent into the Labour Party, or will they just try and ride this out until the election and hope it goes away?
So you used the phrase impending police investigation. Just what actually happened was a week or two ago, the police said that they weren't going to investigate. And then after they were prodded by a Conservative MP, James Daly, they said, oh, actually, we'll have another look at it and we will reinvestigate whether we should investigate. So at the moment, they're in a bit of a holding pattern where they could still say that they're not looking at it at all. I think if the Greater Manchester Police, however, do say that they are going to investigate this fully, then this is a story that could run and run and is quite uncomfortable for Keir Starmer heading towards the election. But bear in mind how much pressure there was on Keir Starmer a couple of years ago over him having curry and beers towards the end of COVID at a work event. And there were all these headlines day in, day out suggesting that the police were going to investigate that. And in the end, they didn't. So I think it's a bit of a wait and see moment on that one for now.
And is that the point, though, Jim? A lot of people have consistently felt that the Labour Party are always saying heads must roll if there's an indiscretion on the Conservative side of the ribbon, as it were. But there's always a feeling, oh, there's nothing really to see here. Let's all move on. Even Sir Keir Starmer himself said to Christopher Hope, GBNews' political editor, last week, he wasn't really interested in seeing the evidence. It's a matter for the police. Is it a feeling of double standards, Jim?
So I think a lot of Labour voters or Labour MPs would take the view that we're talking about relatively small beer here with Angela Rayner. A tax expert called Dan Needle has suggested that it's conceivable that there was maybe £1,500 that she should have paid, but maybe didn't pay. And even then, if she'd done renovations on this particular council house, and if her and her former husband had registered it as their primary residence, then they wouldn't have been eligible to pay anything. And Labour people would compare that with the sums we saw with Nadeem Zahawi when he ended up coughing up nearly £5 million to HM Revenue and Customs. And when people in the Labour Party criticised Rishi Sunak's wife for being a non-dom, we're talking about a couple who are worth £700 million. So non-dom status in those circumstances help you to the tune of potentially tens or hundreds of millions of pounds. So they would say the Angela Rayner case might be different because it's small beer. I think for some voters, however, there is a principle here, which is that we are all meant to pay our tax. And when the people who make our rules are found potentially to have broken those rules, then it doesn't matter whether it's a small sum or a large sum. I'm sure lots of people would take that point of view. But let's not forget that at the moment, as far as we know, the police haven't yet said they're going to investigate. And I think that there is a little bit of waiting here to work out what they're going to do first.
Superb. Jim Pickard hit the nail on the head there. Fantastic stuff. Deputy Principal Editor of the FT. Thanks for joining us on this Easter Monday. Now, I'll have lots more on that story, of course, throughout the show. And at 5 o'clock, I'll get the views of a former Labour Party MP. They must be absolutely loving this. And there's plenty of coverage on our website, gbnews.com. And you've helped to make it the fastest growing national news website in the country. Thank you very much. Now, the number of small boats, migrants crossing the English Channel legally this year has increased by a staggering 43% on the same period last year. A total of 5,435 migrants have arrived since the beginning of the year, well in excess of the 3,793 who crossed the Channel by small boats at the same point in 2023. Now, over the Easter weekend, another 791 Channel migrants reached UK waters. And I'm joined now by our Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, one of the 5 key pledges Rishi Sunak made all that time ago was to stop the boats. He can't do it, can he?
I think that's a very pertinent point that you make there, just as well, following on from your previous conversation. He has asked to be judged on his ability to stop the boats as one of those key pledges that he should be judged by. And last year, up until the end of last year, they did see a reduction, and a significant reduction of 36% in small boats crossing. Now, many people who had knowledge of the English Channel and the weather conditions believed that it was more to do with weather than government policy, but still the government was only too willing to come up at multiple points during the year to say how well they were doing in reducing the number of small boats going across. He can't do that so far this year. It's completely reversed now, and then some. 43% rise compared with last year, and it's 36% drop. And of course, the government might turn around and say, well, judge us on the totality of this year. But we may get to the end of this year and it could be even worse than 43%. And indeed, there were some Border Force internal predictions at the beginning of the year suggesting that this year was likely to be busier than last year, and it seems that is indeed what is being borne out, with another 9 boats coming across yesterday following the 7 boats on Saturday. One of those boats, a migrant, filmed on board. We've obtained that footage that show, interestingly, the makeup of some of those on board, and you can see quite clearly a number of Vietnamese, an illustration of the fact that Vietnamese, Chinese, Indian nationals are all subgroups that are growing within the sort of demographics of the makeup of that boat.
And Mark, of course, that completely puts to task the notion that these people are fleeing war zones in fear of persecution and safety. None of those countries are currently at war. And Mark, does that re-emphasise the notion that perhaps the vast majority of those arriving are economic migrants?
Well, certainly those that are very concerned that the asylum system is being gamed by what has become an industry of those who come across, not necessarily from war-torn countries, who then have a backstory that, according to the critics, is aided and abetted by the charities and the human rights groups, to the immigration lawyers, to even the Church of England and other Christian denominations. When they get to the UK, they see the likes of Vietnam, not a war-torn country, China, not a war-torn country for the most part, India, not a war-torn country. You know, they see people coming across from these areas and they say this is clearly, demonstrably economic migration in play here, and not people trying to gain asylum by fleeing for their lives from a war zone. So It's difficult, as I say, for the government, because even though that might be their suspicion, they still have to go through the system. They put a claim in and it needs to be tested. And that, as we know, can be a very long and costly affair with the backlogs in asylum-seeking applications that we've seen over the years.
Excellent stuff, as ever, comprehensive and to the point. Home Security Editor Mark White, thanks for joining us on the show. Now, you may have a holiday booked for this year, but what about next year? Well, you could win a bespoke Greek cruise for two in our brand new giveaway. Not only that, but 10 grand in cash and a luxury travel gift package too. It's our biggest giveaway so far, and here's how you could be in it to win it.
With thanks to Variety Cruises, a family company sailing since 1942, you have the chance to win a £10,000 7-night small boat cruise for two. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, you'll be able to choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and explore Greece like never before. Plus, you'll also win £10,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer sizzle. And we'll pack you off with these luxury travel gifts. For a chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Looks lush. Now, Scotland's controversial hate crime bill has become law today on April Fool's Day. Is this the end of free speech north of the border? We'll discuss that next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
It's the first time we've had an admission from someone who, at least used to be very senior in the party, saying that this election is not about winning, really, for the Conservatives now. It's about mitigating the losses.
There is broad recognition that this election has already been lost and that it's about damage limitation. And it is really important because it's the difference between whether, if Labour win a slim majority, then the fight is on for the next election. I know it seems silly to look 5 years ahead, but it does make a difference, versus basically accepting that we have 10 years of Labour government ahead.
Having an acknowledgement that the Tories are going to lose and lose badly, disastrously maybe, having that acknowledgement coming from somebody so senior is very demoralising for everybody else in the party, but also doesn't it make it then look rather immoral for them to just drag on right through to maybe November?
Personally, I think Rishi Sunak should name the date now. I think he should name it for October or November.
In terms of reform, if they're only 4 points behind the Conservatives in the latest poll, do we need to stop the narrative, which we have been using legitimately, saying, well, they're doing all right in the polls, but they won't win any seats? Do we need to change that perspective now?
I think it's really difficult to say. It depends on Reform's electoral strategy. There's a lot of evidence that in certain parts of the country with certain demographics, they do have a really good chance. So I think if they target seats in the Red Wall and other places where there's big disillusionment with the Conservatives and what they'd promised, I can't imagine that Reform are at the stage where they could take masses of seats. It's more about that portion of the vote that they'll be taking away that I think is going to result in that massive Labour landslide.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio, and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 4:25. I'm Martin Daubney, and this is GB News. Now, later this hour, I'll speak to the woman whose article about how she felt unsafe in Nottingham, my home city, got such a huge reaction from people who said the same thing. Some really touching stories to come out of that. But before that, Scotland's controversial new hate crime law has come into effect today. Campaigners held a protest outside the Scottish Parliament at lunchtime, and they brought a coffin, saying that the new law amounts to the death of free speech. Well, GB News' Scotland reporter Tony Maguire is in Edinburgh. Welcome to the show, Tony. So today is April Fool's Day, meant to be a time for much hilarity. Is anybody laughing on the ground there in Edinburgh?
I think a lot of people, Martin, were laughing at the very idea of this act, of this new law, which came into force at midnight. You know, and while April Fools gave us a good laugh, a good one I heard earlier on today was sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will end you in the slammer. And that very much, that spirit of tackling this kind of this moment head on is very much in the spirit. But enough from me. I've been on the airwaves all day. I'm joined by Susan Smith, who is the director of For Women Scotland. And Susan, for better or worse, here we are again, a year on. We spoke about the GRR this time last year. Not much has changed in the public discourse, has it?
No, not really. But the problem is that now with this new act coming in, there are going to be some people who are not allowed to say what they think. And that even extends to what people might normally think of as the safety of their own home, because there's no dwelling defence. So the implications for free speech are really frightening, especially as we know that the Scottish Police have said that the training they're getting on this is not fit for purpose and that it's going to cause all sorts of problems down the line.
Now, obviously, GRR was a huge story for all of us last year. In a way, Humza Yousaf came in after Nicola Sturgeon, picked up the pieces. But this hate crime and public order, this is very much pushed through by him during his time as a Justice Secretary. What do you think this tells us people in Scotland here about his methodology to governance?
Well, having sat at committee during the committee stages of this and having been involved in a lot of the conversations around this 3 years ago, it really fills me with deep foreboding, because Humza Yousaf, who, as you rightly say, was Justice Secretary at the time, promised that he was going to engage going forward with people like myself and ensure that our concerns did not come to fruition. After the Act passed through Parliament, he made no effort to talk to critics of the Act at all. And in fact, a lot of what he says about this shows that he has a rather half-baked understanding himself. He also withdrew at the 11th hour amendments which would have protected free speech. So it seems like he is weak, he is cowardly, and he is not able to engage with his critics.
Now, one of the most vocal critics, we were talking about her just a moment ago, J.K. Rowling. Now, she was asked a few days ago, would she withdraw tweets during a Twitter spat where she misgendered somebody? Now, she basically said that if she withdrew those tweets, that would be the greatest April Fool of them all. So how does this act affect the gender critical feminist movement and, organisations like For Women Scotland?
Well, it's really scary because women, as we know, are not protected by this act. The Scottish Government made a very deliberate decision to leave out women. And so When women have been attacked at rallies in the past, when they've been subject to horrific abuse and in some cases even punched in the face, that doesn't count as a hate crime. So we're very unprotected. Our belief that there are only two sexes and that people can't change sex is also not protected. Police Scotland seem to think religion and belief are protected. They've said that on their website. They're actually wrong. I am really, really worried that women are going to be targeted maliciously by some of the activists on the other side, and that we're going to have no comeback and no protection in the law on an equivalent basis.
And of course, you did mention the Police Scotland there as well. You know, they have almost turned out to be one of the most vocal critics to this act. But certainly, this is just day one. Lots of days to follow and lots of response and reaction over this week as well. Susan, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much, Tony Maguire and Susan Smith of For Women Scotland, live in Edinburgh. Quick email to read out here on this topic from Crystal. Does this mean that Celtic v Rangers football matches will be held in complete silence then? Or will the police have to arrest the entire crowd? Fair point. And a quick one from Martin saying this. When hearing this, I can't help but think of the Tom Cruise film, The Minority Report, where people are being arrested for crimes they haven't actually committed yet, but they will in the future. I fear we are getting closer and closer to this frightening future in Scotland. There's lots more still to come between now and 5 o'clock. I'll get reaction to the news of the BBC licence fee. Has gone up by more than 6% today. Happy Easter. But first, here's your latest news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Martin, thank you. The top stories this hour. Campaigners in Edinburgh have delivered a coffin outside the Scottish Parliament, symbolising what they say is the death of free speech. It's after the introduction of a new hate crime law, which makes it a crime to stir up hatred against people with protected characteristics. That includes disability, age, sexual orientation, or people who are transgender. Gender-critical author J.K. Rowling said it risks outlawing genuine debate over biological sex, while some police forces have raised concerns that complaints could be lodged for political reasons. The Scottish Conservatives say resources should be directed towards frontline policing. A plan to fine rough sleepers is provoking outrage, with more than 40 Tory MPs said to be preparing to rebel. It was intended to replace the Vagrancy Act from 1824, which currently criminalises both rough sleeping and begging. But reports suggest the new bill has been paused while ministers negotiate with MPs who are concerned about the consequences of issuing fines to homeless people. More than 250 patients a week in England may have died needlessly last year because of long waits for a hospital bed. A report by the Royal College of Emergency Medicine revealed more than 1.5 million patients waited in emergency departments for longer than 12 hours last year. The Department for Health says it added thousands of hospital beds and insists it's making progress on waiting times. And energy bills are due to fall to their lowest rate in 2 years after the regulator Ofgem cut its price cap by 12.3%. It means the average household bill for gas and electricity will fall by around £238 over the course of a year, or £20 a month. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Tatiana. Now, a journalist wrote an article about how Nottingham doesn't feel safe to her anymore. And she received a deluge of messages from people who said the same thing. A moving interview coming next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Johnny Ratner. Long queues on the clockwise carriageway of the M60 this afternoon in Greater Manchester. The motorway is currently blocked from junction 23 to 24 from the Ashton-under-Lyne exit round to Denton Island. An air ambulance is currently at the scene of a very serious accident, which is being described by the police. And very slow heading north up the M6 away from Birmingham after that vehicle caught fire earlier on and left a spillage just south of the Wolverhampton exit, junction 10. All lanes are back open. It's still queuing the other way as well, back towards the M54. The M3, that's got 2 lanes out towards London at 1, the Sunbury exit following a collision. In Essex, the Leighton Road at Billericay has been blocked since this morning following a building fire. And in West Sussex, the A27, the Chichester bypass closed eastbound off the Fishbourne roundabout following an accident. And there are no long distance trains to and from London Euston today for engineering work. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Patrick Christie's Tonight. Weekdays from 9 p.m.
Has the NHS killed your relative and then lied to you about it? There is an alleged cover-up culture in the NHS. They lie to you about why your loved one died, about poor care, then bury documents with evidence in them, and they try to silence staff who speak out. This is according to the NHS Ombudsman. There are around 11,000 avoidable deaths every year. 11,000. Someone's mum dies, their children know something dodgy happened, and then they're met with a rotten culture, including the altering of care plans, the disappearance of crucial documents, and complete denials. They lie to you, but they really get away with it because the NHS is like a religion, and people dare not criticise it. You'd be accused of NHSophobia. The annual budget is around £180 billion, and we now have about 2 million people working for the NHS. They cannot keep blaming everything on being underfunded and understaffed. If they're covering up medical negligence, it means the problem doesn't get dealt with and it keeps happening. And that is the fault of the NHS managers, the people who run it. They've got the money for 837 non-clinical staff working at English hospitals on the highest paid Band 9 contracts, which is between £99,000 and £115,000 a year. How many nurses would that pay for? How many junior doctors? And they've got the time on their hands to think about making the NHS the world's first carbon-neutral health service. They've got time to consider whether women in labour should be picked up by an electric ambulance that might have to be recharged en route to the hospital. There are NHS managers with a budget of £180 billion, 2 million members of staff, and they're crying about being understaffed and under-resourced. If they spent more time looking after patients instead of finding ways to cover up avoidable deaths, then maybe we'd have a better health service.
Welcome back. 4:36 is your time. I'm Martin Daubney and this is GB News. Now, later in the show, we'll talk about the London Council that's making a staggering £1 million every single month from one low-traffic neighbourhood. Now, the descent of our town centres into lawlessness is nothing new, but in Nottingham, it seems criminals are becoming even more brazen. In this footage here, a number of young men, all with their hoods up, and 3 of them carrying machetes in broad daylight, can be seen wielding their weapons before a passerby appears to calm the situation, and some of the gang run down the steps next to an art gallery, a street I know well. And it seems it's not just a one-off. However, as Natalie Fay found out when she wrote an article about how unsafe Nottingham city centre has become. What happened next is that readers wrote in to say it's not just in the city, and whilst the perpetrators are treated like victims and the victims not protected, it will never end. Natalie, I agree. The wife and I do not go out into the town centre now. We like to go to shopping in town, to M&S for new clothes, but we're now scared to go on the bus into town. Well, I'm delighted to say that Natalie Fay, who's the editor of Nottingham Live, joins me now. Natalie, welcome to the show. I read your article over the weekend with a mixture of, well, first of all, thank you for your bravery in speaking out, and secondly, a sense of profound sadness that this is my home city, the place I was born. I too share your sentiment. Nottingham feels very, very different now. Natalie, can I ask you, what prompted you to write this article, and explain to me, if you can, the volume of response you received?
Well, what prompted me to write the article was a mixture of my own personal experiences. I know Nottingham like you do. I've worked there for 12, nearly 13 years, going to the city every day. My partner's Nottingham born and bred, so we know the city very well. But this footage you're showing here was what prompted it, really. And, you know, I think we've got an important role as local news journalists to speak out on issues that are affecting people every single day in our cities. And this is something that regional newspapers are doing. You won't get this sort of story on the BBC, but we're doing it. So what prompted it? Well, it was this footage, my own experiences. But I think it's just a feeling of general decline in Nottingham city centre. And there's a number of reasons for that. You know, they used to call Nottingham the Queen of the Midlands, as you know. It was a thriving shopping place, loads of independent shops, restaurants, people were out and about at all times of the day and night. But this incident we're watching here happened in broad daylight, lunchtime on a Wednesday. It's a busy area. It's in near the Lace Market. So it's a nice part of the city, supposedly. But I just find when I'm walking around, you know, there are people like this who are they're all dressed in black. They've got face coverings on. They've got the hoods up. You can't see who they are. And they'll either be sort of loitering nearby, watching, or cycling past you at great speed. So I've had it on a few occasions when I've walked to the train station after finishing my shift at work. So we're in daylight now when that happens. And quite often you will feel the breeze from someone cycling past you so closely that, you know, it's almost like your bag could be stolen or your phone could be stolen. And I'm sure there's a lot of people watching the show who have actually experienced robbery in Nottingham. So, but as I said, there's a number of factors at play here. You will know that Nottingham City Council declared itself effectively bankrupt at the end of last year. So they've got no money to sort anything out. So we've got a lot of decline in the city centre, and that's producing this kind of downward spiral whereby people don't want to invest, they don't want to come in, new businesses don't want to open up. And Listergate, which used to be one of the main shopping drags down to the Broadmarsh Shopping Centre, obviously Broadmarsh Shopping Centre flattened, building site now, Listergate is full of derelict shops. And you've got this kind of funnel going through to the train station where a lot of this stuff is happening, I find. But there are some other factors too.
Yeah, and these are streets. I grew up on the streets and areas I know very, very well. Nazzy, tell us about what happened next, because you wrote this piece from the heart, you put it out there, and I've read some of the email response you got. They're incredibly emotional, I find. It's almost like people are grieving. They're grieving for a city that they feel is being lost. Tell us about some of the kind of things people were saying.
Well, I think people don't get a chance to express their voices very often, and we try to do that all the time, Nottinghamshire Live and the Nottingham Post. So I quite often send out an editor's newsletter with something I'm writing about, and the responses vary, you know, as they would do. But the responses I got to this were staggering, and my inbox was beeping off quite a lot. And you'll know as a journalist, people are always shouting on Facebook and Twitter, but for people to actually take the effort to write an email to you, and these are well-written emails, it's the next step, you know, so people must feel really strongly about this. And I was staggered by the response. And I'm used to getting some flack for some of the things I write, but people were really in agreement with me. And I actually felt very sad reading this, especially that one where the man, we've blocked out the names, but the man said we don't go to Marks and Spencer's anymore. And I just thought, that's so sad. And you find this when you go out in the city, it just feels kind of lawless. People aren't out like they used to be. Maybe it's cost of living, I don't know. But these gangs of people are allowed to sort of roam, and it just feels like there isn't anything to stop them. There's not enough of a volume of other kind of people to block them out, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, Natalie, there was one email that really kind of got me choked from a gentleman who said he was born in Chilwell in 1943. I'd be classed, I guess, as an old dinosaur, you might say now. As a teenager being disabled, I knew I could walk from one end of Nottingham to the other at night without fear. I used to work as a taxi driver, but now I'd never go out into town at night. You know, Natalie, this is upsetting to hear. And it's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? It seems to be a general decline, but the vast majority of people are watching this and they feel they have an investment in their city and they want something to change, and you're a journalist who's given them a voice, so well done.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a breakdown of society, a breakdown of community, isn't it? I mean, it's so sad that a veteran, you know, someone who's given their service to our country feels like they can't go out and enjoy themselves in their own city. I mean, I'm in my mid-40s. I'm not disabled. I went out in Nottingham on Saturday night, and I had my 2 children with me, and they said they felt scared. So it happened again on Saturday. But we should be welcoming people into the city centre. And I don't know how City Council and maybe the police are going to sort of get out of this spiral and get people back in to the city and get it thriving again. But when we've got businesses closing down and people don't want to invest, and there's no police on the streets, Nottinghamshire Police is in special measures at the moment, although just to give them due credit, they did arrest those people on that video. So it's just a kind of breakdown of everything all at the same time, I think.
Yeah, and it's worth pointing out, you are correct to say that one of them is now banged up for 18 months. He'd previously been carrying weapons. And the other kid got 16 months, aged 19 and 18. So at least the police did step in and get a resolution there. But Natalie Faye, thank you for writing this article. It's sad that we meet in these circumstances, but people need a voice, and you gave it to them. Natalie Faye is the editor of Nottingham Live. Thank you for joining me on the show.
Thank you.
Find that very emotional. Now, today's been branded National Price Hike Day, and that's not an April Fool. Council tax, water bills and the BBC licence fee have all gone up. Happy Easter. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather. It's a mixed picture out there, and over the next few days it remains very similar, unsettled, further spells of rain, but there will be some warm sunshine at times. Looking at the pressure pattern, low pressure systems moving in from the Atlantic, bringing spells of rain, some stronger winds, particularly later on in the week. But there will be some sunny spells in between, which is what we've seen across parts of England and Wales today. These showers should slowly fade away. However, we will see further spells of rain across parts of Scotland into northern England, particularly in the east, some of this heavy at times. In between, there will be some clear spells, and this will allow temperatures to dip down into low single figures. So perhaps a touch of light frost in the countryside for one or two of us, but for most it's a cloudy start to Tuesday. Further showers in places. This rain across eastern Scotland remains here for much of the day. A little brighter across the far north. Some sunny spells developing across much of the UK as we move through into the afternoon, but a scattering of showers. Towards the southwest, this band of cloud and rain will push in, and temperatures overall reaching the mid-teens in the south, still chilly across Scotland, 7 or 8 degrees. Taking a look at Wednesday, the next area of low pressure moves in, showery outbreaks of rain pushing north and eastwards across the country. Some of this heavy at times, blustery around the coasts, followed by sunshine and showers, and it remains unsettled through the rest of the week. Further rain at times, but in any sunshine, temperatures lifting.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. The time is 4:48. I'm Martin Daubney. It's Easter Monday and this is GB News. Now at 5 o'clock, I'll get more reaction to the poll that says the Tories might just win 80 seats at the next general election, their worst ever performance. But before that, the BBC licence fee has gone up today, happy Easter, by an inflation-busting 6.6%. If you recall, it was frozen for 2 years, but it's increased from 159 quid to 169 £50. And GB News has been out and about in Loughborough asking what this means for you.
Absolutely disgusting. I don't think we should be paying licence fees. I think that if people wanted to watch the BBC, they should have the option to opt in rather than having to be enforced to do so.
I think it's wrong that sort of older people were getting it free and now they've started charging you. And I think to put it up that much, the quality of the programmes are just not good enough.
I have to pay it, haven't I? It's law of the land, isn't it? Just in case you switch on BBC, listen to the news. Other than that, it's not nice. They're putting prices up.
Well, basically, it's just getting a bit too expensive for the quality. And I think they spend too much on certain individuals that always seem to be on TV, and they're very expensive. Surely they would be better off having, well, say lower grade, but people that are not so well known who can probably do the job just as well. But
sometimes it's all right, like when you have sport on, or if you have like a darts match or something like that, or snooker worry like, that's all right. But apart from that, no, I don't think it should be that much money, really.
Fantastic stuff. Well, joining me now is the former BBC Royal correspondent, the legendary Michael Cole. Michael, welcome to the show. I hope you're having a wonderful Easter. Let's play devil's advocate. Everything else is going up in price. 6.6% is in line with inflation over the past few years. Surely this is just recompense. The BBC licence fee should go up.
Good afternoon, Martin. The licence fee is an iniquitous poll tax that nobody ever voted for, and fewer people actually pay. Young people don't look at the BBC, and older people like me are the most despised demographic for the BBC, and even the programmes we like Antiques Roadshow and Countryfile, are now infected by political propaganda and wokeism, so that they are unwatchable. What the BBC is, I'm afraid, is a self-perpetuating oligarchy of like-minded liberal people who think that they know best, and they're going to force upon us what they want, and we're going to pay for it. This poll tax is unique in the world because that corporation, we're seeing New Broadcasting House there, is the only one in the world ever set up not to make money, but to spend it. And that is iniquitous, and it's dreadful. I worked for the BBC for more than a fifth of its existence, more than 20 years. When I joined in 1968, the brigadier who was running the induction course said there were 28,000 staff members, but only 10% of them, 2,800, were actually to do with programmes. And that included the people taking round the scripts, the messengers. At that time, 28,000. Today, it's 22,000. The difference is, in the intervening years, the BBC no longer makes most of its programmes. They're all bought in. Why do you need 22,000 people? Because it's a self-perpetuating bureaucracy, and bureaucracies know one thing only, and that is to grow. And there has never been an empire builder like the BBC, not since the Roman Empire at its greatest extent in AD 117 under the Emperor Trajan. Everywhere the BBC goes, it wants to seek and dominate. And in the regions where I live, it's trying to dominate the news agenda, and it's putting out of business the very, very valuable local newspapers upon whom we rely. And what do the BBC do? They actually steal most of their stories to put in their morning news bulletins on the local radio stations. So after 101 years not out, it's time for the umpire to raise his finger and point towards the pavilion and say, "Thank you very much, BBC. You've had a jolly good innings. Goodbye."
Well, Michael, you certainly bowled a googly there. But what should be done then? What, put this back to the market? Or is there a way of streamlining it? Or are you saying the game is up, put this to the market, it should be subscription only?
This book here, How Do We Pay for the BBC After 2027? 2027, the date for the renewal of the Royal Charter. That's its licence to continue broadcasting. I've written a chapter in it, and I've said the BBC must be destroyed in order to be saved. And you can break up the BBC, put the news, current affairs, Radio 4, all of that into a channel like American PBS public broadcasting system. Put all the culture, entertainment, if you will, into a subscription service. Put all the radio stations, which after all run adverts already, but they're promotions for other programs, make them into fully commercial stations, because that's what the BBC is even introducing itself already. As for sport, once it was the jewel in the crown of the BBC, it cannot afford, apart from Wimbledon, and it struggles to pay for that, it cannot afford the sports rights now. Leave it to the people who can.
OK, Michael, I'm afraid simply because of time, we have to leave it there. But bang on the money as ever. Michael Cole, thank you very much for joining us. A poll says the Conservatives will win just 80 seats at the next election. But first of all, it's time for your weather with Greg Dewhurst.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather. It's a mixed picture out there, and over the next few days it remains very similar, unsettled, further spells of rain, but there will be some warm sunshine at times. Looking at the pressure pattern, low pressure systems moving in from the Atlantic, bringing spells of rain, some stronger winds, particularly later on in the week. But there will be some sunny spells in between, which is what we've seen across parts of England and Wales today. These showers should slowly fade away. However, we will see further spells of rain across parts of Scotland into northern England, particularly in the east, some of this heavy at times. In between, there will be some clear spells, and this will allow temperatures to dip down into low single figures. So perhaps a touch of light frost in the countryside for one or two of us, but for most, it's a cloudy start to Tuesday. Further showers in places. This rain across eastern Scotland remains here for much of the day. A little brighter across the far north. Some sunny spells developing across much of the UK as we move through into the afternoon, but a scattering of showers. Towards the southwest, this band of cloud and rain will push in, and temperatures overall reaching the mid-teens in the south, still chilly across Scotland, 7 or 8 degrees. Taking a look at Wednesday, the next area of low pressure moves in, showery outbreaks of rain pushing north and eastwards across the country. Some of this heavy at times, blustery around the coasts, followed by sunshine and showers, and it remains unsettled through the rest of the week. Further rain at times, but in any sunshine, temperatures lifting.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Long queues through West Yorkshire on the M62 of about an hour now heading westbound, junction 23 to 22 heading west of Huddersfield, with one lane still out of action for those emergency barrier repair works taking place. And the M60 in Greater Manchester remains blocked clockwise, junction 23 at Ashton-under-Lyme to 24 at the A57. An air ambulance is at the scene of a serious accident. The clockwise M25 solid on the western stretch after an earlier breakdown just north of the M4, queuing back to the Staines bypass and the other way back past the M40 back into Hertfordshire. The M3 is down to a single lane into London at 1 at Sunbury following an accident, and the M2 in Kent is being held coastbound, junction 5 to 6 from Sittingbourne to Faversham following a serious collision. And there are no long distance trains to and from London Euston today for the engineering works. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
You could win our biggest prize giveaway so far. First, there's an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. Plus, courtesy of Variety Cruises, a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, your next holiday could be on us. Choose any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. We'll also send you packing with these luxury travel gifts. For a chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, a very, very happy Easter Monday to you. It's 5 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster, all across the UK. Today, there's reaction to the shocking new poll that says the Conservatives could win just 80 seats at the next general election, their lowest ever tally, as traditional Tory voters turn increasingly to the Reform Party. After that, protesters have come out in force against Scotland's controversial new hate crime bill. They say it's the death of free speech, and it was announced on April Fool's Day. And a certain London council could be raking in a whopping £1 million every single month from a single low-traffic neighbourhood enforcement area. Is this fair on the beleaguered motorists, or are they simply being milked dry? And that's all coming up in your next hour. Welcome to the show. I hope your Easter is fruitful and peaceful and restful. I want to get in touch with you, please. All the usual ways, gbviews@gbnews.com. We've had hundreds of emails today. You're really listening. You're really picking up on the detail. An amazing response. Thank you so much. I want to read out a couple of quick ones now. I did an interview with a journalist from Nottingham, the editor of Nottingham Live, called Natalie Fay, who wrote an article, a very emotional article, about how she felt the streets of Nottingham were being lost to lawlessness, and hundreds of people responded saying they agree with her. I found it very emotional. Nottingham is my home city. Anne says this: I've just tuned in and I've heard you say, Martin, it's like the people of Nottingham are in mourning for their town being lost. Well, I think the majority of people in this country are in mourning for our once great country. Steve says this: the perpetrators all wear the same uniform, puffer jackets, their hoods up, face masks, etc., covering their identity. Surely the police should be out in force targeting youths dressed like that. It's simple common sense. Instead, they seem to take the side of the perpetrators. Please keep those emails coming in. gbviews@gbnews.com, all the usual ways. But first, let's get stuck into your latest news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Martin, thank you. The top stories this hour. Campaigners in Edinburgh have delivered a coffin outside the Scottish Parliament, symbolising what they say is the death of free speech. It's after the introduction of a new hate crime law, which makes it a crime to stir up hatred against people with protected characteristics. That includes disability, age, sexual orientation, or people who are transgender. Gender-critical author J.K. Rowling said it risks outlawing genuine debate over biological sex, while some police forces have raised concerns that complaints could be lodged for political reasons. The Scottish Conservatives say resources should be directed towards frontline policing. Plans to fine rough sleepers are provoking outrage, with more than 40 Conservative MPs said to be preparing to rebel. The new criminal justice bill would allow police to fine or move on so-called nuisance rough sleepers. It was intended to replace the Vagrancy Act from 1824, which currently criminalises both rough sleeping and begging. But reports suggest the new bill has been paused while ministers negotiate with MPs who are concerned about the consequences of issuing fines for homeless people. The plans were introduced by the former Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, who branded rough sleeping a lifestyle choice. The head of the Nurses' Union has accused the government of packing hospital corridors with patients and says the quality of care is not only undignified but fatally unsafe. It comes as new estimates suggest more than 250 patients a week in England may have died needlessly last year because of long waits for a hospital bed. A report by the Royal College of Emergency Medicine revealed more than 1.5 million patients waited in emergency departments for longer than 12 hours last year. The Department for Health says it added thousands of hospital beds and insists it's making progress on waiting times. The government's compensation scheme for victims of the Windrush scandal has been branded a failure 5 years after it started. It was set up to compensate British citizens who were wrongly threatened with deportation despite having the right to live in the UK. However, campaigners are warning the number of people dying before getting payouts is increasing. They're calling on ministers to overhaul the process and speed up payments, with the Home Office replaced by an independent body. That is, more than 5,400 migrants have been intercepted crossing the English Channel in small boats during the first 3 months of this year. It's a record figure for that quarter, up 43% compared to the same time in 2023. Official figures from the Home Office show 442 people made the crossing in 9 small boats yesterday. That's despite difficult weather conditions, with lifeboats scrambling to assist some of the arrivals. Today's strong winds have now made the journey completely impassable. Some households will feel the effects of a cash boost from today as new economic policies come into effect. The national living wage is increasing to £11.44, giving a pay rise to around 3 million of Britain's lowest paid workers. Small businesses will also benefit from a raised VAT threshold and fully funded apprenticeships for young people. Energy bills are due to fall to their lowest rate in 2 years after the regulator Ofgem cut its price cap by 12.3%. It means the average household bill for gas and electricity will fall by around £238 over the course of a year, or around £20 a month. However, around 10 million households are still being urged to submit meter readings to avoid overpayment. And the people of County Meath in Ireland are raising a glass to a 1,000-year-old oak tree that's about to get a second life. The huge tree, which measured a girth of 10 metres, stood for centuries on the grounds of Swainstone Farm. But its 1,000-year lifespan came to an end when Storm Ellen hit last year. Now, thanks to the revival of the Preston's whisky label, which has been off shelves for 60 years, the old tree will be transformed into whisky barrels. Experts say it's rare for Irish oak to be used to make barrels, and rarer still for whisky lovers to get a taste of ancient Ireland. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen, or you can go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now back to Martin.
Thank you, Tatiana. Now we start with the poll that says the Tories could be wiped out thanks to Reform UK at the next general election. And it claims that splitting the votes between Rishi Sunak and Richard Tice's parties could leave the Conservative with just 80 seats, and that will be the Tories' worst ever general election results. Well, I'm joined now by former Labour Minister Bill Rammell. Bill, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure. Hope you're having a fantastic Easter. Bill, you must be loving this, just watching the Tories and the Reform take clumps about each other. All you got to do is sit back and wait for power, right?
Well, anything that demonstrates that we've had an appalling Tory government for 14 years and they are fundamentally split is good news for the Labour Party and good news for the country. And this certainly fits that bill. But I think anyone who wants to be certain of ridding themselves of the Tories needs to vote Labour at the next general election. You know, Reform are a distraction. But I think it does demonstrate as well that the Tories are terrified of losing votes to Reform, in addition to those they're losing to the Labour Party. I also think by obsessing and focusing around the extreme agenda around Reform, they're pointed in the wrong direction, because I firmly believe you can only ultimately win general elections from the centre ground. And in a sense, by focusing on extreme, the Tories demonstrate even more so that they're unelectable.
Bill, how do you what's so extreme about wanting to control your borders, wanting to make sure there's a fair working wage for British people, wanting to make sure that net zero doesn't run rife and people are taxed into oblivion? What's extreme about that? I don't understand what you mean.
OK, I'll give you some examples, because I'm in favour of reducing immigration from the current unsustainable levels. But Reform talk about net zero in terms of immigration. Tell that to the families of people in long-term residential care homes who couldn't survive without immigrants. They also talk about zero waiting lists in the National Health Service. And they would achieve that, they say, by allowing NHS staff to go tax-free for 3 years. Not the first clue about how that's going to be paid for. And it's an impossibilist agenda that ultimately would deeply disillusion people. And that's why I say they've got an extreme platform. And by pandering to that, and you can see that in the rhetoric and the hardening of policies by the Tory party, the Tories are further abandoning the centre ground and making themselves more unelectable.
But, Bill, net zero immigration would still mean 300,000. It's not saying absolute zero. And as for net zero, isn't the point is that people would like to have a say on it? Now people are understanding the huge cost of what it means actually in their pockets and their purses and their wallets. 18.4 billion quid was the price that the Labour Party put on it, and then suddenly you realise you couldn't afford it.
Well, look, in terms of immigration, you know, we've got net migration at almost 800,000. That's 3 times the figure it was when Labour was in power. And we just have posturing and gimmicks from the Tory party to try and bring that figure down. But you do need some immigration, you know, within the health service, within the care sector. Those services would not function without some form of immigration and bringing people into the country to plug those jobs, and they do excellent work. And I think it's that Reform are not addressing. But, you know, ultimately, come the general election, and this is where I do agree with the Tory party, it's going to be a choice between Labour and the Conservatives. And I'm still one of those people who goes out on the doorstep every weekend in my own constituency, and I do find huge numbers of people coming to the Labour Party. Occasionally, and I'll acknowledge this, you will find a former Labour voter attracted to Reform, but for every one of those, there's 5 or 6 former Tories who are moving to Reform.
Well, Bill, I fought in the 2019 election. I fought in the General and the European Union. There were a huge number of Labour Party voters who voted for the Brexit Party or the Tory party at the time because they felt that the Labour Party had abandoned the working classes on things like immigration, on things like a fair day's pay for a British worker, rather than continually relying upon ever-increasing immigration, which drives wages down. Those kind of policies used to be the preserve of the political left. It seems they've abandoned that now.
I think to some extent Martin, that was a fair critique of Labour under Corbyn, who ran, in my view, an extremist agenda, abandoning centre ground, abandoning traditional working class communities. That is most certainly not the case under Keir Starmer, where we're being straight, we're being steadfast and reasonable and honest with people. We're making it clear we do want to bring immigration down, and we'll do that through, clearing the backlog, through returns agreements with other countries. But we'll do it properly and we'll do it sustainably. And I think, given the carnage that people have seen in those working class communities, in the Red Wall, if you like, over the last 14 years under the Tories, people are increasingly looking to the Labour Party to kick the Tories out and return some sanity and security to our politics.
OK, Bill, it won't be plain sailing on one front, and that is the continuing headache the Labour Party seems to have over Angela Rayner and this council house issue, the police toying with the idea of reopening an investigation. Is that something that's going to affect voters, or are you going to try and just ride this out until the general election and hope it goes away?
I do not believe Angela has done anything wrong. She's taken legal advice on her tax affairs. Yes, when you get a clamour, and it's coming from the Tory party for an issue to be investigated, that is happening. I'm absolutely confident at the end of that process, there will be nothing to find and nothing to fear. Angela's a straight, decent woman, came up from humble working class roots, and I don't believe that she's done anything wrong. And I think that time will prove that to be the case.
OK, thank you very much for joining us on the show. Former Labour Minister Bill Rammell, always a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Now, let's get more on the situation regarding Angela Rayner, as we touched upon there. I'm now joined by the barrister, Rebecca Butler. Rebecca, welcome to the show. I hope you're having a splendid Easter. So, Bill Rammell seems confident, nothing much to see here. This will all blow over. She's an honest, upstanding member of society. But from a legal point of view, Rebecca, what happens next?
Well, it's an evidential point of view, really, not a legal point of view, because once the evidence has been investigated by the police, what the neighbours have to say, then a decision will be made on whether she falsified documents or not. I mean, the law is that in order to get the CGT relief on a house you sell, in order to get that CGT relief, it has to be your primary residence. Now, people get distracted over the legal advice. We don't know what the legal advice was based on. If she said, well, if I said I was living with my husband, am I liable for capital gains tax? And they'd say, yes. If I'm living with my brother, am I liable for capital gains tax? No. So the question is, where was she living and which was her primary residence? Ultimately, that would be a matter for the court to find and, to come to a judgment on. But it won't go that far. Keir Starmer's thrown her under a bus already. That's fairly obvious. He's not looking at the legal advice. He's saying, I trust her. If it turns out that, the police take the view that the neighbours were telling the truth, she was living with her husband rather than her brother. It's a bit of a stretch to think that she wasn't living with her husband and children. Then she's going to have to say, well, I'm going to have to resign. And then there'll be a deputy leadership competition over the summer months, which is probably the last thing Starmer wants. But he's already thrown her under the bus by saying he hasn't read the legal advice.
And Rebecca, do you think it's an issue that people on the Labour Party side are saying, well, it was only a small sum of money, it's just a couple of £1,000, inconsequential when you compare to the net worth of the Prime Minister or previous allegations like Naheem Zahawi? Or is it the principle? I mean, does the amount of money matter? Or is it the legal principle and the price is immaterial?
It's integrity that matters. The number is irrelevant. We can't keep on with this envy narrative around Rishi Sunak, because as far as I'm aware, he's never misled the officials over his, over his taxes. Nadeem Zahawi, different situation. He was under HMRC investigation, and then the conclusion was that he did owe that tax, which he paid. I think if she was smart politically, and what I would have told her to do is just say I was a carer. I didn't really know what I was doing. I'm not particularly well educated. Can I pay you the money now? The story would have gone away in about 3 days if she'd done that, and that would have demonstrated integrity. But while she persists in calling people liars when they say she wasn't living there, she's calling those people liars. This story isn't going to go away. And of course, as I say, Keir Starmer's just standing back saying, well, I'm not looking at that legal advice because the legal advice is based on what you told the tax advisors or the lawyers, what you've told Parliament, what you've told the press. And the minute that turns out not to be the truth, he's going to tell the press that he's extremely disappointed. It's a very sad day for Labour, and she's going to say, "Well, I can't be the story anymore." You and I know how the stories pan out. You and I know how they end up resigning. And if she's misled people, she's going to have to go. But until the evidence is tested, we won't really know. It's her hypocrisy that's a problem, Martin, because she calls everybody Tory scum. And what is rather notable is that none in the Tory party have been abusive and rude to her over this. They've just said, sort it out.
OK, we have to leave it there. Fascinating, forthright forensic stuff. Thank you very much, Rebecca Butler, barrister on the case of Angela Rayner. Now it's our biggest giveaway of the year so far. Brace yourselves for your chance to win a 10 grand Greek cruise for two, 10 grand in cash, and a whole host of luxury travel gifts. Your 2025 holiday could be on us here at GB News. And here's all the details that you need to enter.
You could win our biggest prize giveaway so far. First, there's an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. Plus, courtesy of Variety Cruises, a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, your next holiday could be on us. Choose any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. We'll also send you packing with these luxury travel gifts. For a chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Great stuff. Now, Scotland's controversial hate crime bill has become law today on April Fool's Day. It's the end of free speech north of the border. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Dubes & Co. Weekdays from 6 p.m.
The Guardian's not happy, everybody, because one of their headline stories today was about a private members club that is for gentlemen only, the Garrick Club I refer to in London. There's accusations now, Quinton, that it's all the kind of upper echelons of society, all the powerful...
It's a cabal of important, powerful people who are running the country.
And I thought to myself, when I heard descriptions like that, I bet Quinton Letts is somehow involved. Are you?
I've been to the Garrick a few times.
Why can't women be members?
Because it's a gents' club. My daughter, one of my daughters, is a member of an all-women's club called the University Women's Club, and they don't allow blokes in. It's an outrage. No, it's not. It's a free country.
I mean, it's archaic and it needs to change.
What is?
Is my view. The fact that the Garrick doesn't admit women members. So there are lots of these members clubs, across London, probably in other parts of the country as well, and you have to pay for membership, so it is well-to-do members of society that go. I've nothing against them existing, but all of them have changed their constitution. Those that were once men only, they all now admit women. The only exception now is the Garrick. my other thought is, well, why are we talking about it if we've got nothing more important going on?
Just to be frank, I genuinely could not care less if there is a club that I'm not allowed into because of my sex. I do, though, think that if you're going to start...
You're allowed in there. They let them in.
Yeah, but not as members.
Yeah.
But I do think if you're going to start, you know, having all of this kind of respect and all the rest of it for single-sex spaces for men, then you can't, as a society, allow the ridiculousness that goes on in female spaces when a man sticks a dress on and a wig maybe and a bit of lipstick if he's feeling bold and says that he's called Sharon and then wants to be allowed into that space, and then those establishments then buckle and let those men actually into things like changing rooms of women. That really, really annoys me.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. It's 5:23. I'm Martin Daubney. This is Easter Monday and this is GB News. Now, later this hour, we'll talk about the London Council that's making a staggering £1 million every single month from one low-traffic neighbourhood. But before that, Scotland's controversial new hate crime law has come into effect today. Campaigners held a protest outside the Scottish Parliament at lunchtime, and they even brought a coffin, saying that the new law amounts to the death of free speech. Well, the new law is aimed to tackle hatred and prejudice towards characteristics such as age, disability, religion, sexual orientation, and, of course, transgender identity. Well, I'm joined now by Helen Joyce, who's the Director of Advocacy at Sex Matters. Helen, welcome to the show. I hope you're having a splendid Easter. Well, I'm assuming because of its position, this new hate crime bill on women's issues, you think this is the least funny April Fool's joke in history?
Yeah, although the Scottish Government and the Scottish Police do seem to be trying to make a bit of a joke of it when, you know, their campaign Hate Hurts is fronted by a hate monster who's a sort of cuddly, bright red Muppet-style thing. And some of the things that Humza Yousaf said about it were from a soft play centre over the weekend. But yeah, it's really not a joke.
And so what things in particular concern you? We've seen already J.K. Rowling saying that she's prepared to be arrested. In fact, she's using the hashtag #ArrestMe on social media, saying she won't change a single thing about her position on trans issues. If they carry on at this rate, then they're going to need a bigger jail, aren't they, Helen?
Yeah, so the problem, I mean, there are problems with the law the way that it's written. I don't want to say that there aren't, but the thing that's really irritating me about a lot of the, you know, reasonable commentary on it is that they're ignoring that it's not actually clever lawyers who know the wording of the law who enforce the law. It's the police. And the police have basically not been trained on this at all. There's a 2-hour online training course they're meant to have done, and lots of them haven't already done it. And we know from the way that the police have been talking about it that they're wildly overstretching what it might actually be to be, in particular, abusive, which is one of the words in the new law, and specifically on the issue of transgender identity, because that's the one that really concerns me. The issue here is that there are lobby groups like Stonewall that have spent years and years saying that if a man identifies as a woman, saying he's a man is abusive. And it seems to me like the police in Scotland and probably all over the rest of the UK have bought that silly idea. Whereas it's not just not abusive, it's actually essential if you want to protect women's rights, because there's no other way to keep men out of women's spaces than but to say that they can't come in because they're men. So that in a nutshell is my issue with it. I think it's going to be badly policed. There'll be lots of really malicious reporting of women like me. The police may investigate those, and as criminologists say, the process is the punishment.
Why do you think they're persevering with this, Helen, when we saw how the introduction of double rapists, male biological men into women's jails, went down so badly it almost brought down the SNP, and yet they seem to just persevere?
I wish you could ask them that, because I would love to know the answer to that too. I mean, it seems to me so insane to claim that just noticing the fact that there are two sexes and that sex can't change is meant to be hateful, that even after years of trying to study it, I can't understand why people hold this belief. But it's part and parcel of a pattern of legal measures that the Scottish Government has either introduced or has sought to introduce. So it tried to introduce gender self-ID, but that was overruled by Westminster because it was out of the power of the devolved government. It's still attempting to bring in a conversion therapy law, which sounds nice but isn't nice. It actually criminalises proper ethical treatment of gender-confused youngsters. They're trying to say that men who have certificates saying that they're women count as women for a particular measure to do with public boards. And then this hate crime law, which tries to make it really difficult for someone to talk in a factual, reality-based, clear, understandable way about all these measures. It all adds up to a sort of an authoritarian attempt to deny the fact that human beings are mammals and come in two sexes, and that recognising that matters for women's rights especially.
Excellent stuff. Thank you very much, Helen Joyce, who's the Director of Advocacy at Sex Matters. Thanks for joining us on the show. Now, before we move on to our next guest, I have to read out some of the emails. You've sent so many amazing emails in today, and something that's particularly touched you is the city of Nottingham. A journalist I spoke to, Natalie Fay, saying that many people there feel their city is being lost to street hoodlums and petty crime. Brian says this: Dear Martin, thanks for discussing with Natalie the unsafe areas of Nottingham. My wife and I also feel unsafe. I'm always checking who's around us and also looking to shop windows to see if anyone is behaving suspiciously. Electric scooters, cyclists near the old Broadmarsh Centre behave dangerously, zooming dangerously close to us all the time. We are both Nottingham born but have travelled widely, and it's so sad to see how our city has changed for the worse. And Hilary adds this: we're already a lawless society and many crimes not solved, not punished. So another kick in the teeth for the law-abiding citizens of the UK. It's absolutely disgraceful. Thank you for speaking out for us, the silent majority. Robert adds this: we have no law and order now, thanks to our cowardly, woke police. The Batley Grammar School teacher had no police protection. The victims of the grooming gangs had no police protection. The victims were the ones who were arrested, and we're seeing the same on the streets of Nottingham. Ian adds this: these machete attacks, they are all drug-related. The drug problem in this country is out of control, and the police are having little effect. Thank you very much for all of that. Now there's good news and bad news today, as some bills fall while others rocket upwards, and the average household energy bill is dropping to its lowest point in 2 years. However, water bills are rising by 6%. Happy Easter. And this is, of course, at a time when water companies keep pumping gallons of sewage into our waterways. And I'm joined now by Selene Saxby, who's a Conservative MP for North Devon. Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us. There's an increasing amount of sewage in our waterways, Selene, and the Liberal Democrats, they're blaming you.
It's Selene, and there isn't an increasing amount of sewage in our waterways. And I think that is the factual inaccuracies really need addressing in the reporting around this entire story. What's increased is the amount of monitoring of the overflows, which was 7% at the end of the last Labour administration. And now we monitor every single overflow going into the seas and the rivers, which means, yes, we have more data, but no, we don't actually have more sewage. We don't have beaches as clean as those in my constituency of North Devon because they're constantly full of sewage.
Yeah, and in fact, we had a reporter, Jeff Moody, in North Devon earlier, and he said the problem is very clear, and that is when it rains too much, water overflows, takes the sewage into the sea, into waterways, places where people bathe and swim. What's the solution? Do we have to put more fines onto the companies? What should be done about it?
Well, I think that the government already has a plan which is showing many signs of working in many parts of the country. It's important to recognise different water companies are behaving in different ways. And certainly up here, a huge amount of investment has already gone into North Devon. And so, yes, when it rains a lot, the overflows run. But what's in that overflow is at least 95%. So that's not sewage. Sewage isn't that colour when it comes out of an overflow. When it comes out of an overflow, it is very clear. That's runoff from a field. Almost certainly. The issue we have at this time of year is that water isn't tested. But we do know from the water companies what comes out of our overflow pipes up here is at least 95% rainwater. Therefore, it's not raw sewage. And up here, we're on the edge of the Atlantic Ocean, and it is going out into the Atlantic Ocean below the tide line. And the testing that has already been done up here ahead of the new bathing water season is showing that our beaches have retained their excellent bathing water status despite the fact it has rained. So if we want the overflows to stop running here, yes, we'd like to make sure that what comes out is 100% clean, but we also need to be realistic. It rains a lot in the southwest of England. It's rained an incredible amount this winter, and therefore the overflows have run more than the previous year.
OK, superb. So thanks very much for joining us on the show. Selene Saxby, apologies for the mispronunciation of your name at the start. The Conservative MP, of course, for North Devon. Have a splendid rest of your bank holiday Easter Monday. Now, there's lots more still to come between now and 6 p.m, and I'll speak to a royal expert after the King went on a meet and greet yesterday. Charles seems to be on the made. Marvellous stuff. But first, here's your latest news headlines. Tatiana Sanchez.
Martin, thank you very much. The top stories this hour. Campaigners in Edinburgh have delivered a coffin outside the Scottish Parliament, symbolising what they say is the death of free speech. It's after the introduction of a new hate crime law, which makes it a crime to stir up hatred against people with protected characteristics. That includes disability, age, sexual orientation or people who are transgender. Gender-critical author J.K. Rowling said it risks outlawing genuine debate over biological sex, while some police forces have raised concerns that complaints could be lodged for political reasons. The Scottish Conservatives say resources should be directed towards frontline policing. A plan to fine rough sleepers is provoking outrage, with more than 40 Tory MPs said to be preparing to rebel. It was intended to replace the Vagrancy Act from 1824, which currently criminalises both rough sleeping and begging. But reports suggest the new bill has been paused while ministers negotiate with MPs who are concerned about the consequences of issuing fines to homeless people. More than 250 patients a week in England may have died needlessly last year because of long waits for a hospital bed. A report by the Royal College of Emergency Medicine revealed more than 1.5 million patients waited in emergency departments for longer than 12 hours last year. The Department for Health says it added thousands of hospital beds and insists it's making progress on waiting times. Energy bills are due to fall to their lowest rate in 2 years after the regulator Ofgem cut its price cap by 12.3%. It means the average household bill for gas and electricity will fall by around £238 over the course of a year, or about £20 a month. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
For a valuable legacy your family can own, gold coins will always shine bright. Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2544 and €1.1687. The price of gold is £1,786.20 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's closed at 7,952 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Tatiana. Now, joining me now is Dawn Neeson, who's standing in for Michelle Dewberry on Jubes & Co this evening. Dawn, what's on your menu, darling?
Good afternoon, Martin. We've got a cracking show coming up. We're investigating why a swastika painted on a police station in North London is a race hate crime, but one being waved at a Palestinian peace demonstration isn't. Why Ricky Gervais is going to get nicked if he ever goes to Scotland again. And Sconegate, Martin. Why scones have now gone so woke, you're going to choke. Plus, some bank holiday fun with an April Fool's Day quiz.
Superb stuff. Sounds like a superb menu. Even the scones. Or is it scones? Now, a certain London council could be raking in a staggering £1 million a month from a single low-traffic neighbourhood area. I'm asking the big question, are the motorists just being milked dry? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Long queues on the M62 westbound through West Yorkshire do continue. Junction 23 to 22, heading away from Huddersfield. Those emergency barrier repair works that have now been completed means that delays of about half an hour do remain. And the M60 in Greater Manchester stays shut clockwise at Junction 23, the Ashton Underline exit. An air ambulance remains at the scene of a serious accident. Meanwhile, the M25 still very slow anti-clockwise and clockwise past the scene of two separate breakdowns earlier on, just north of the M4. In Essex, the A176, the Langdon Road, is blocked each way through Billericay. That's following a building fire this morning. And there are no long-distance trains to and from London Euston today. That's for the engineering works, although Avanti and London North Western are saying they're running a reduced service to the north of Milton Keynes. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
Serving police officers, showing that up to 20% of them are thinking about quitting the force and doing so within the next year or two. What on earth is going wrong? Problem, of course, is that those that go will be the experienced ones to be replaced by inexperienced ones. Kevin Hurley, former Detective Chief Superintendent at the Met Police, joins me from his home in Surrey. Kevin, this figure is shocking.
The terms and conditions have really dropped off under Theresa May's what I would describe as an attack on the police service, where their pay has really dropped off, spending power down about 22% on what it once was. Worse still, the golden handcuffs, which were once the excellent police pension, have been taken away, and the pension is now much reduced. The other thing that's killing them is the constant media and activist battering for police officers. Off the back of that, one psychopath and the other, if you like, Tinder rapist, everybody now thinks the police are kind of all like that. What that means for the individual patrol officers, they're being given stick everywhere. For example, you know, their bosses left, right and centre are rolling over, oh yes, we're institutionally racist. What that means for a 25-year-old constable working in Balham High Street is everyone screaming at him, you're a racist pig. They get surrounded on the streets when they try and do a stop and search or an arrest. Add to that the fact that the criminal justice system is collapsing. They're tipping out the prisons with early releases, so because, of course, there's no prison space. Cases are taking years to get to court. They're getting derisory sentences because there's no room in the prisons. All of that's really demoralising for the police.
First. Spring has sprung, the grass is green. I wonder where King Charles has been. Well, he was
I've got all watery-eyed because I'm so keen in the royal family, and I thought it was such a shame he was so ill.
We see the economy turning a corner this year. We'll see interest rates dropping, taxes dropping, of course. All those things are all good news to people. Of course, there's more to do, but things really are turning a corner.
If Labour is privileged enough to form a government, we will stand by these entitlements. We will not take these entitlements away or reduce them. But what we will do is put forward an actual way of accessing them.
I'm a moorland, I live in a hole. Yeah, what? That's what just came into my head. I was a moorland, I live in a hole.
From 6, it's Breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 5:41. We're on the final furlong. Let's get galloping. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, low traffic neighbourhoods in London are still having a major impact on motorists. Previously unseen figures suggest Hammersmith and Fulham Council issued more than 340,000 penalty charges in less than a year, raking in up to £1 million per month from motorists. But the council says this: since the trials began, fines have tumbled by almost 80%, while pollution from congestion has become a thing of the past in residential streets, which are now quieter, cleaner and safer. Well, joining us now to discuss this is the director of the Climate Media Coalition, Donncha McCarthy. Welcome to the show, Donncha. Hope you're having a splendid Easter. So they're saying the fines are down, but the fact of the matter is there's still a staggering amount of dosh. Since 2012, London LTN has raked in £91 million from LTNs. This is just another way, isn't it, of milking the motorist dry?
Well, I think what the actual council says and what the government's recent report into LTN says is they're a roaring success. I mean, if you are supportive of less children being injured on our roads, then this is a good way to go. The reports state that around 70%, up to 70% reduction, Martin, in the number of crashes taking place in these family neighbourhoods. I think that's a really good thing that we should be celebrating. And I think your point made as well. The fines in Hammersmith did start off at 1.3 million a month, but they're now gone down to 230,000, a drop of over 80% as drivers learn that if they drive through those barriers, they get fined.
But it's obvious there are going to be less injuries or cars on the road, Donncha. There's no flaming cars on the road. You can't get down these roads. That's the point. It's all fair to say that there's less pollution and less accidents there. Well, there would be. There are no vehicles. However, look on the main roads where this is moved to, a bit like neighbourhood watch. You don't solve the crime, you move it.
Well, actually, the government, Rishi Sunak launched a survey into LTNs with the intention of trashing them in response to the war that the Sun waged on them. And he hoped that the report would give him the evidence to destroy them. In fact, it did the opposite. It found that actually traffic went down radically in the neighbourhoods and it didn't impact the surrounding areas in most of the LTNs. A few of them have been problematical and those have been changed. And I think that's the right thing to do.
The ones in my neighbourhood have simply meant gridlock on the main roads, right past my kids' school playground, I hasten to add. So, I mean, there are also lots of other reports out, Donncha, showing that emergency vehicle response times have been greatly increased because, of course, all of the traffic is funnelled onto the main roads.
Well, I'm afraid I don't know where you've been reading those reports, because the actual government report looked into that and it found that the emergency vehicle timings weren't impacted. And if you are concerned, as you rightly are concerned, Martin, about emergency vehicles, as I am, if there are 70% less crashes in residential areas and no increase in crashes outside them, then that means we have less emergencies for the vehicles to go to. That's a win-win, isn't it?
You're not seriously claiming that LTNs have had a 70% deduction in road accidents. How can that possibly be the case? You might say that on the streets where there's no roads, but what about the overall amount? It just moves it. I repeat my point, Donncha.
No, I'm talking about evidence. Within low traffic neighbourhoods, university studies and government studies have shown crashes are down by up to 70%, with no increase in the crashes in boundary roads. One of the things that happens on boundary roads, which is interesting, because there's less junctions that people are allowed to drive in and out of, that means the number of junctions on the boundary roads is reduced, and that actually makes them safer, Martin.
OK, I think people might be appreciative or supportive in general, Donncha, if they could see where the money went. £91 million in LTNs alone. Forget about ULEZ, forget about everything else. £91 million since 2012. Where's the money gone? And there's been no appreciable improvement in public transport. In fact, the fares go up year by year by year. There's a feeling we get screwed on that anyway. Where's the dosh go?
Well, I think your point about the impact on public transport is important, because people keep saying, you introduced the article saying motorists are being hammered. Over the last 14 years, motorists have had a cut in food duty every single year, which is £90 billion. I'm not talking about 90 million. 90 million is buckets. It's a drop in the ocean to the cut that drivers have had over the last 14 years. £90 billion in cuts. And you're right, during that time, the cost for public transport, which is most of Londoners use public transport, not cars to go to work, we have been hammered by government increases every year, above inflation. I'm on your side. I want public transport costs reduced.
OK, superb. As ever, Donica McCarthy, thanks for joining us on the show, the director of the Climate Media Coalition. Always great sport. Thanks for joining us on the show. Now, Donald Trump has hinted that he could deport Prince Harry if he becomes president for allegedly lying on his visa application about his drug use. Of course, that was in his memoir, Spare. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather. It's a mixed picture out there, and over the next few days it remains very similar, unsettled, further spells of rain, but there will be some warm sunshine at times. Looking at the pressure pattern, low pressure systems moving in from the Atlantic, bringing spells of rain, some stronger winds, particularly later on in the week. But there will be some sunny spells in between, which is what we've seen across parts of England and Wales today. These showers should slowly fade away. However, we will see further spells of rain across parts of Scotland into northern England, particularly in the east, some of this heavy at times. In between, there will be some clear spells, and this will allow temperatures to dip down into low single figures. So perhaps a touch of light frost in the countryside for one or two of us, but for most it's a cloudy start to Tuesday. Further showers in places. This rain across eastern Scotland remains here for much of the day. A little brighter across the far north. Some sunny spells developing across much of the UK as we move through into the afternoon, but a scattering of showers. Towards the southwest, this band of cloud and rain will push in, and temperatures overall reaching the mid-teens in the south, still chilly across Scotland, 7 or 8 degrees. Taking a look at Wednesday, the next area of low pressure moves in, showery outbreaks of rain pushing north and eastwards across the country. Some of this heavy at times, blustery around the coasts, followed by sunshine and showers, and it remains unsettled through the rest of the week. Further rain at times, but in any sunshine, temperatures lifting.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQs live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQs live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Bang on 5:50. I'm Martin Daubney and this is GB News. Now, I'm delighted to say that I've got some very good news for you on Easter Monday, and it's this. The fundraiser for the Batley Grammar School teacher, who of course was forced into hiding 3 years ago, has now gone past the £100,000 mark. Now, we publicised the fundraiser a week or so ago when a friend of the teacher, Paul Halloran, appeared on my show. And the teacher, of course, has been in hiding now for more than 3 years after showing a caricature of the Prophet Muhammad in an RE lesson. So delighted to announce that we've now reached the £100,000 mark, and that money goes directly to the teacher, and trust me, every penny is very, very gratefully received. Now, I want to do a few of your emails as well. You've been sending in so many emails today on the BBC, on migrants, on Scottish hate law, Tory v Reform. But one thing that's really, really touched you, obviously, is an item I did earlier about a journalist in Nottingham who said that people in the city no longer feel safe, a sense of grieving for a city that has been lost. Emma wrote in with this. I've lived in Nottingham all my life and I'm saddened by how the city has degenerated. I recently started working in the city again and I've seen homeless people defecating in the street, young men sizing up each other, lifting their tops to make sure they're not carrying knives. And I've even been asked if I want to buy stolen perfume and had a mentally ill man follow me during my lunch break. The city is dirty, shops are shutting down and they are not reopening. It simply doesn't feel safe for me anymore. Carol adds this. It's the same situation in practically every town in Britain. I live in Newport. It's exactly the same. Absolutely appalling what's happening to our country. Where's the respect? Where are the police? Russell adds this. We need to ban hoodies and masked face items of clothing for security reasons. And if so, the police must enforce the law. Frank adds this. The state of our cities and towns today with marauding youngsters is due to the do-gooders stopping parental discipline, and what we see is now the result. Now, the King has returned to public duties for the first time since his cancer diagnosis. Pictured outside Windsor Castle, doctors cleared the monarch for a walkabout on Easter Sunday, where he carried out a huge 56 handshakes. Did you see those pictures? I thought it was absolutely superb, because we were told all the time, weren't we, the King had to be very, very careful because of the state of his immune system for any potential treatment he was undergoing. And we learned this was a very, very important moment for him, the traditional walkabout at Windsor Castle. Look at the King there, shaking hands openly with members of the public. This is the King doing what he wanted to do and the King doing what he wants to do best. And Queen Camilla looking on, proud as punch. You could see it in her eyes. It was just a joyful sight to behold, and an unexpected bonus that we got at Easter. It wasn't really on the agenda, wasn't announced. Smaller crowd than usual. And in other raw news before we move on, Donald Trump could deport Prince Harry if he became president, recall, after the Duke of Sussex appeared to lie on his visa application about his drug use. And what's fascinating about this is that the Daily Mail ran a survey, a poll of its US readers, and 44% of them said that yes, they would like to see Harry deported. And the top comment was fascinating. 8,000 views from an American viewer said, at the bottom of your visa application, it clearly states, I swear under penalty of perjury that the foregoing is true and correct to the best of my knowledge. So they are saying if he willingly told a porky on that application, he might well be in trouble. And especially so if a certain President Trump becomes the president, because, of course, we know how much he loved the Queen. Could this be a revenge dish served up cold? Now, that's it from me on this Easter Monday. Of course, Jubes & Co. is up next with Dawn Neeson. But don't forget to join us from 6 a.m. tomorrow. It's breakfast with Stephen and Ellie, followed by Britain's Newsroom at 9:30 with Andrew and Bev. And then, of course, Tom and Emily with Good Afternoon Britain from midday. I'll be back at 3. I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News. See you at 3 tomorrow. But first, time for your weather forecast with Greg Dewhurst.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather. It's a mixed picture out there, and over the next few days it remains very similar, unsettled, further spells of rain, but there will be some warm sunshine at times. Looking at the pressure pattern, low pressure systems moving in from the Atlantic, bringing spells of rain, some stronger winds, particularly later on in the week. But there will be some sunny spells in between, which is what we've seen across parts of England and Wales today. These showers should slowly fade away. However, we will see further spells of rain across parts of Scotland into northern England, particularly in the east, some of this heavy at times. In between, there will be some clear spells, and this will allow temperatures to dip down into low single figures. So perhaps a touch of light frost in the countryside for one or two of us. But for most, it's a cloudy start to Tuesday. Further showers in places. This rain across eastern Scotland remains here for much of the day. A little brighter across the far north. Some sunny spells developing across much of the UK as we move through into the afternoon, but a scattering of showers. Towards the southwest, this band of cloud and rain will push in, and temperatures overall reaching the mid-teens in the south, still chilly across Scotland, 7 or 8 degrees. Taking a look at Wednesday, the next area of low pressure moves in. Showery outbreaks of rain pushing north and eastwards across the country. Some of this heavy at times, blustery around the coasts, followed by sunshine and showers, and it remains unsettled through the rest of the week. Further rain at times, but in any sunshine, temperatures lifting.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, my name is Johnny Ratner. The M6 continues to crawl for roughly a quarter of an hour heading south through Cheshire. Just before the Sandbach and Crewe exit junction 17, the two outside lanes are coned off, where emergency services are currently on scene, removing animals off the motorway to safety. And then an update on the situation on the M60 in Greater Manchester. Well, I can see on the cameras that they've still got the outside lane closed clockwise at 23 at Ashton-under-Lyne after they held traffic earlier on following a collision where air ambulance was at the scene. On the Hertfordshire stretch of the M25, lanes closed clockwise towards 25 at the A10 following an accident. Long queues heading north through Somerset on the M5 and Patches junction 25 to 19 heading away from Taunton towards Bristol due to holiday traffic, and no long distance trains to and from London Euston today. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
With thanks to Variety Cruises, a family company sailing since 1942, you have the chance to win a £10,000 7-night small boat cruise for two. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, you'll be able to choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and explore Greece like never before. Plus, you'll also win £10,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer sizzle. And we'll pack you off with these luxury travel gifts. For a chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Good evening, happy Bank Holiday Monday. Hope you're having a wonderful time. It's 6 o'clock. I'm Dawn Neeson, standing in for the lovely Michelle Dewberry. On tonight's show, more than 200,000 people took part in a demonstration in central London on Saturday to demand an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. We're used to them, we've seen them before. There were 4 arrests, one of which was for suspicion of a terrorism-related offence. Is it time we ban these so-called peace marches altogether, though?
And Scotland's new hate crime laws have come into force today. We've seen scenes of protest in Edinburgh, and the likes of J.K. Rowling has dared police to arrest her, saying the legislation could stifle free speech and vows to extend these protections to, oh yeah, women. Do you agree, or do you think it'll be a roaring success? And plus, tea rooms, Sconegate. People in tea rooms everywhere are outraged. Do people in tea rooms get outraged? Outraged with the National Trust for making all of their scones vegan. Is this a big fuss about nothing, or an attack on a humble British scone heritage? And finally, have you, like me, had enough of April Fool's Day? Is it an annual annoyance or just a bit of harmless fun? You tell me, I know what I think. Any case, that's all to come in the next hour with a cracking panel, by the way. But first, let's get the latest news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Dawn, lovely to see you and good evening. The top stories: campaigners in Edinburgh have delivered a coffin outside the Scottish Parliament, symbolising what they say is the death of free speech. It's after the introduction of a new hate crime law, which makes it a crime to stir up hatred against people with protected characteristics. That includes disability, age, sexual orientation, or people who are transgender. GB News Scotland reporter Tony Maguire says there's widespread concern.
Earlier today we spoke to Susan Smith, the director of For Women Scotland. Her concerns are that this act will be weaponised against transgender critical feminist movement. We've heard from a few pastors who are concerned that the church's work will be impeded because they won't be able to provide sermons and services in the community. And perhaps the biggest shock is that one of the largest critics of this is the police themselves, those who are actually charged with upholding this law. They're concerned that officers are already stretched and that this new law is so divisive that it will actually go further to turning the public against them.
Plans to fine rough sleepers are provoking outrage, with more than 40